If Oberyn Martell was not there, beside him or within the Red Keep, Ned could make a different choice. With the Red Viper beside him, the only option was to betray his friend, again. A brief consideration for how fleeting honor, honesty, and loyalty had become passed through Ned's mind. How had he become the man he was? Little by little, bit by bit, the quiet young man who had tried to be good, honorable, and honest had made so many compromises that the bitter taste never quite left his mouth. He would have to side with Renly, but would they have enough men to do the deed? If they captured the Lannister children, would they be able to hold them captive? What would the next step be? Ned's answer was firm and bitter. You will win the love of Dorne when his sister is avenged and Tywin Lannister is brought to his knees. Is that what you are prepared to do? Oberyn's eyes glittered in the dim light of torches and the full moon. He looked between the two men, appraising the situation in silence. Renly considered both men, and bowed his head in thought. Ned looked down, seeing the writ of succession which he clutched in his hand. Queen Cersei's children were bastards, no true heirs to King Robert. Ned had written the words "my heir" instead of "my son" in the order of the regency. Should the regency pass to a Baratheon heir, the crown should go to Stannis Baratheon, the second of Lord Steffon Baratheon's sons. Yet Dorne would only be appeased if their blood was upon the throne. Do it, Ned hissed through clenched teeth. Both men turned to face him abruptly. Renly's face betrayed his shock and Oberyn's smile spoke of bloodshed. Gather your men and take the queen and her children into custody. He wanted to vomit, everything about this decision seemed wrong. Once you have them secured, I shall convene the council to hear your brother's words and discuss the matter of the succession. Ned looked upon Renly, a reflection of his brother Robert so long ago, and was filled with cold fury. Pray that your brother can forgive this dishonor we do to him upon his deathbed. Renly's lips twitched, though with what emotion Ned did not know or care. My brother cared little for anyone save himself, in life or in death, but I thank you for your decision. They parted a moment later. Renly went to seek out his allies and gather them to seize the queen and her children. Prince Oberyn walked with Ned, though they remained quiet until arriving at the Tower of the Hand. Once Ned and Oberyn were alone in the solar, Ned sank wearily onto the plush chair behind the desk. His leg was throbbing and his heart was hollow. He prayed that his children were safe, wherever they were. He prayed that the gods would forgive his betrayals. My men will assist Lord Renly, Oberyn was saying, though his words scarcely registered to Ned's distressed mind. But to what end? Ned ran his hands along his face and through his hair. Only the gods know. If you want to avenge your sister, this is the time. When the small council convenes they will know all that I know. All. Doubt was evident in the prince's voice. The unspoken question was clear to Ned. Did he mean to reveal the truth about Jon? Not that. He had promised Lyanna to keep Jon safe. Jon would only be safe if he remained the bastard son of the Lord of Winterfell and Ashera Dayne. Jon of House Targaryen, the son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, could never exist. They will learn the truth of Cersei Lannister and her children. They will know that the Kingslayer attempted to murder my son and that their actions led to the hostilities in the Riverlands. Do we have enough support to hold the city against the Queen, against her father? I will send for Lord Baelish, he wields considerable sway over the Gold Cloaks. If we are to hold the city, then we need more swords. Ned slammed his hand onto the desk, causing one of the inkwells to tip and spill. He hissed a curse. Would that I had never come to this place. Oberyn watched in silence for a few brief moments, and then smiled. I was wrong to tell Ashera that you were a boring man. Then in somber tones he added, I will send a man for Lord Baelish and then rouse my men. He bowed politely and then swept from the room. Eddard Stark was now alone with his thoughts, and truly there was no more frightful place for him at that moment. He wished for a godswood, a true godswood, with a weirwood heart tree. Yet would the gods give him solace? Was he still a good man? Was he still an honorable man? His best friend, his third brother, would die before a day passed. Yet even as his friend lay dying, the legacy of Robert Baratheon was being destroyed. Ned had promised Robert to watch over his children, and Ned would do that. Once there was peace, Ned would ensure that Robert's bastards were well kept. Peace, what price would peace cost this time? How many children would be murdered? How many children would be orphaned? He hated Lyanna and Roriger in that moment. He hated his brother Brandon. He hated the Mad King and the Kingslayer. He hated Robert and Cersei. Most of all he hated himself for making decisions which seemed to never have a good ending. The ache of loss threatened to overwhelm him. He wanted to go home. He wanted Winterfell. He wanted Catelyn in his arms. He wanted his children around him, all of his children. He wanted to see them laugh and play together. Only the gods knew if he would ever see his family again. Some time later, Kyne and Desmond arrived with Littlefinger between them. From his attire, it seemed as though he had already been about for the day when Ned's men had found him. Were Ned less exhausted, such a thing might have seemed curious to him. Lord Petter seated himself across from Ned, a smirk upon his lips. The Whisperers in the Red Keep are telling fascinating tales tonight. I suppose that congratulations are in order. The king lies wounded and near to death. Ned's reply was cold and harsh. This was not a moment for levity. I know, and I know that Robert named you protector of the realm. And how is it that you know that, my lord? Varys hinted as much, and you have just confirmed it. Ned swore. He was so sick of games, and yet, if Littlefinger did not know of the plan which had been devised to detain the queen and her children, then perhaps some secrets were still kept for the moment. Weighing his options, Ned decided to have some trust in this man whom his wife considered as a little brother. He told Petter the truth about the bastardy of the queen's children. Littlefinger's response showed that he was not at all shocked by the news. So with no legitimate heirs, the path of succession becomes quite tenuous, does it not? Ned tensed his jaw. By rights the succession should pass to Stannis. Should. Petter stretched the word out, allowing the syllables to seem ponderous. However, Stannis cannot take the throne without help. Ned was well aware of that fact. He was also well aware that Stannis sitting upon the throne would not appease Dorne, and if Dorne were not appeased, had he sent his children into a prison? Would Prince Doran Martell hold his children as hostages to ensure that Dorne's vengeance was complete? Treason, every possible move was treason. Usurping the throne as his friend lay dying, what had he become? Is that why you have asked me here, Lord Stark, for assistance? You promised Catelyn that you would help me. The man's eyes narrowed, as they had upon their first meeting. Ned did not like Lord Baelish's frosty and almost possessive nature toward Catelyn. Ned's mistakes regarding his wife were his to bear. It was not another man's duty to protect his wife, no matter what mistakes he had made. His smile seemed bitter. And I shall, Lord Stark. First I will tell you that Stannis Baratheon is not the right man for the Iron Throne. He is no man's friend, even his brothers find him distasteful. He is hard and unyielding. Seating him upon the throne would spell death for Cersei and her bastards, and arouse the anger of Lord Tywine. He spoke of the men and houses who would not side with Stannis Baratheon as king, men who had sided with the Targaryens during Robert's rebellion or Balon Greyjoy in his rebellion. He also spoke of the benefits Ned could have by marrying his own children to the Queen's bastards. Yet Ned knew that he could not and would not marry his children to the Lannister bastards, unless. You can control Joffrey, Lord Baelish was saying. He is but a boy, and controlling him should allow us time to dispose of any unwanted issues. Then, should he prove troublesome, we can reveal his little secret and put Lord Renly upon the throne. Renly upon the throne. It might work, could work. Renly Baratheon was well loved, and were he to be placed upon the throne, many would support him. He was unwed and so was the heiress of Dorne, a marriage which would appease the Dornish. A match which would keep his children safe. I will not wed my children to the Lannisters. I will not seek to put my children in harm's way or upon this bloody throne. What you suggest is treason. What I am doing now, as we speak, is treason. Dorne will not stand for the bastard sitting upon the throne. You informed the Viper of the truth. Littlefinger released a scoffing laugh. Then he sighed. I suppose that the Tyrells will not wish to see Joffrey upon the throne either. Seeing the question in Ned's eyes, he produced an unsealed parchment and laid it upon the desk, though he did not remove his hand. With the good Maester Pycelle occupied with the king, the ravens are quite free to deliver letters. This arrived earlier this evening and was discovered by an associate of mine. I presume that the Maester was intending to inform the Queen in the morning, long before telling you. The Mountain is dead, from the men you sent to bring him to justice. Loras Tyrell struck the killing blow, but he himself was killed in the process. Lord Tywine will find it difficult to placate the anger of the Tyrells now that their son lies dead. Now then, whom would you suggest that we place upon the Iron Throne? Ned clenched his fists beneath the desk. There were no words to describe how vile he felt. It was your suggestion, Lord Baelish, we place Renly Baratheon upon the throne. Petyr Baelish smiled, truly smiled, at Ned's words. Renly would be supported by myself, the Stormlands, and likely the Martells, Tyrells, Riverlands, and Vale. An alliance which not even Tywine Lannister could possibly withstand, provided that every house falls into line behind Renly. King's Landing must be secured first and foremost. For that you would need many swords. Littlefinger's smile grew impossibly wide. And to guarantee so many swords, you have come to the man who pays the most swords in the city. Tell me, Lord Stark, do you already have some plan in action? What should a man do when he is trapped between honor and dishonor? When trapped between truth and lies? Brandon had impulsively chosen to defend Lyanna without a second thought. Rhaegar had thrown away honor, duty, and marriage for a mere girl, and the realm had bled. What was Ned when compared to his own brother and sister? Would his choices now make the realm bleed as theirs had done so many years before? At this very moment the Queen and her children are being secured. I intend to call the council together so that the succession can be discussed. I know, however, that you are a man who has a price. What price would it take to secure the gold cloaks to this cause? Oh, for them, a few thousand gold, a small price to avoid losing our heads. And for you? I am certain that Lord Renly will give me anything of my choosing once he is given a throne, don't you agree? Ned bowed his head low, in agreement and disgust. Then I will be on my way, Lord Stark. The man stood, bowed, and departed the room. When he was alone, Ned cradled his head in his hands and wept. Gods forgive me, he whispered into the quiet of his chamber. Underscore 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 underscore. King Robert Baratheon, first of his name, was dead by the time they convened within the Tower of the Hand. Morning had just barely broken, grey and dull. The birds were singing beyond the walls of the tower, but their tones seemed joyless. The men arrived one by one, in various states of dress and attire. Prince Oberyn Martell's clothes were blooded. Lord Renly Baratheon's clothes were slightly torn, and his cheek was bruised. Lord Petyr Baelish arrived with Janos Slynt, the commander of the City Watch, both seeming fresh and clean compared to the first two men. Varys slipped into the room silently, as he was always wont to do, his face seemed as ominous as ever. Grand Maester Pycelle and Sir Barristan Semley arrived a while after the other men. Neither appeared to have slept much during the night, and their faces were lined with age and exhaustion. Eddard Stark wearily requested that all of the men be seated, to which they all complied. "Is it done?" Ned asked Renly and Oberyn, before addressing the rest of the council. Renly gave a terse nod of the head. "They are unharmed and under guard," Oberyn replied. "Whom, may I ask, is unharmed and under guard?" The question came from Sir Barristan, who had probably noted the state of Renly and Oberyn's attire. With the Ned paused, the words catching in his throat. He breathed deeply before continuing. "With the passing of King Robert it is necessary for us to discuss the succession of the crown." He proceeded to read the writ of succession and explain the truth of Cersei Lannister's children. The only men who seemed surprised by the revelation were Sir Barristan and Janos Slynt. Pycelle protested vehemently that such an accusation was spurious. It took several minutes of loud discussion and debate for the room to fall quiet again. "I heard it from Lady Cersei herself." Ned's voice was calm and level. "The persons who are under guard are the former queen and her children. Regarding this matter, it would be judicious to hold a trial. For the moment, I believe that we all wish to know more about their dispositions." "Tommen and Myrcella are sequestered together," Renly replied quietly. "They are with one of their nursemaids and guarded by some of my personal guard. They only know that my brother was wounded, they know nothing more." Prince Oberyn replied next. Cersei and her son Joffrey are held by my men. Ned regarded the Viper doubtfully. Why is there blood on your clothing? I had a minor dispute with one of the former Queen's men. He is dead now, as are several more of her personal guards. Ned swore under his breath, and he noticed that he was not alone in his distress. Pycelle protested the actions of the men. Oberyn eyed the Maester as though he were deciding how best to stick him with a sword. Sir Barristan remained quiet and unreadable. Eventually, the discussion of whom the next king should be arose. Ned bitterly recalled that he had been in such a discussion before, when his friend Robert was crowned. He allowed Littlefinger to make the suggestion in favor of Lord Renly, though it was a long time in coming. Baelish, Varys, and Renly discussed. Pycelle protested. Ned spoke little, though he offered his support in favor of Lord Renly. Oberyn Martell observed the proceedings carefully, with narrowed eyes. Eventually, he too suggested that Dorne might support Renly, though there would need to be some considerations. The other two men simply observed, Barristan stoically and Janos Slynt appearing as though he were a fish out of water. By midday, the decision was made to crown Renly Baratheon as King of Westeros. Letters were sent to the kingdoms of Westeros, declaring the death of King Robert, the bastardization of the children of the former Queen Cersei, and the ascension of Renly as the new king. The remainder of the day was spent subduing the city, writing letters, and affirming the positions of the council. Sir Barristan Selmy was requested to retain his position, to which he requested and was permitted a day to consider his future. Grand Maester Pycelle was detained as a prisoner, removed from his position, and deemed untrustworthy. Lord Varys was retained as Master of Whisperers, seemingly unaffected by the change in authority. Lord Baelish was pleased to retain his position and to be granted his price. His demand was rather simple, a greater lordship and a high-born wife, once peace was re-established, to which Renly readily agreed. Ned, though he had no greater wish than to return home, was retained in his position due to his assistance with Renly's ascension. Prince Oberyn was granted a position on the council as well, for the same reasons. Securing the city was a bloody job. Over 300 men who claimed loyalty to Cersei Lannister died within the Red Keep and King's Landing that day. Among the dead were Sir Meryn Trant, of the Kingsguard, and Sandor Clegane. More than 100 other men were killed in the fighting that day, including 2 of Prince Oberyn's guards who died in subduing Clegane. A matter of alliances was among the first order of duties, after the city was secured. Renly wrote to his retainers in the Stormlands, calling them to arms in his support. Ned wrote to Winterfell, calling his men to support the Riverlands first, as Lannister forces had been reported as fighting Tully men in the Riverlands. Once the Riverlands were supported, the northern forces would be able to assist in the south. He also wrote to his wife's family, stating that the North would support the Riverlands as kinsmen, and hoped that they would bend to Renly as king. He wrote similarly to Lysa Arryn in the Vale. When Ned was alone with Oberyn and Renly, he spoke with them at length about the need for a southern alliance. An alliance bound in marriage to keep the strength of the South united as had been done during Robert's rebellion with houses Stark, Tully, and Arryn. Renly seemed reluctant to discuss the idea of marriage, but he also seemed to understand the importance. Letters were sent to Prince Doran Martell and Lord Mace Tyrell requesting not only their allegiance, but a marriage pact. Ned did not doubt that the Martells would wish to see Arianne upon the throne, in place of her kin who had been murdered by the Lannisters. He also did not doubt that the ever-ambitious Tyrells would wish for their daughter Margaery to be crowned as the queen. The details were not Ned's concern, though he doubted there would be peace if the Tyrells chose to join Lord Tywine over King Renly. The goal would be to wed Baratheon, Martell, and Tyrell, in whatever way the lords so decided. Underscore 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 underscore. Meanwhile in the north, Robb Stark, acting as Lord of Winterfell in his father's stead, had already begun to call his bannermen to arms. Lady Catelyn Stark had sent a letter to Winterfell, from the Vale, requesting that the North aid Riverrun against Lannister aggression. As a son of the North and the Riverlands, Robb knew that his duty was to support his family in the south. The northern armies would begin their march south a fortnight after receiving Lord Stark's letters regarding Renly Baratheon's ascension to the throne. The grey-black walls of Blackhaven rose in the distance after nearly 3 weeks of riding. Were it not for the knowledge that they had essentially fled the capital, returning to a familiar place would have been a welcome respite. To make matters worse, John had never seen girls so miserable as his sisters and Jane Poole. Alysanne was trying her hardest to make the other girls happy, but she was probably the moodiest of them all. He felt badly for Alice. She had spent the least amount of time with their father, even though she had wanted to see him so strongly. Yet she had done her duty in gathering everything the girls would need for their journey. She had not complained, not even when Prince Oberyn had told them that their father had commanded them south, along with their half-sisters. Arthur had complained, but he had enjoyed the busyness of the capital and had little desire to return south. Even John had enjoyed King's Landing. He had spent a great amount of time speaking with Lord Renly Baratheon, Sir Loras Tyrell, and several other knights and minor lords during his stay in the capital. He was thinking of asking his mother if he could learn to be a knight for one of the lords in the Stormlands or Reach. The closer they drew to Blackhaven, they could see several hundred tents surrounding the castle. Drawing nearer, the banners which flew above the tents could be seen. Houses whose loyalty was to House Dondarrion were encamped by the thousands around the castle. As they passed the soldiers, some of them recognized Lord Dondarrion at the head of their small group, and cheered. The gates were open to their approach. Inside the walls, they were warmly greeted by Ryland Dondarrion, Lord Beric's younger brother. Yet while his greeting was kind, the younger Dondarrion appeared to be anxious. It was a few short moments after they were within Blackhaven that Lord Beric dismounted from his steed and walked from the group with his brother. The rest of the group was assisted by stewards, grooms, and attendants. Their horses were taken to the stables while their belongings were taken into the castle. Finally, they were all escorted inside to be shown where they would be staying. The children of the group, consisting of John, Arthur, Alysanne, Edric, Sansa, Arya, and Jane Poole, were given rooms in the eastern wing of the castle. The rooms were all close to one another, with bedchambers, sitting rooms, and a shared dining hall. John was fairly certain that he had stayed in the same set of rooms with his family before, when they had visited Blackhaven with Aunt Illyria. Their shared dining hall was already laid with food and drink so that they might refresh after their journey. They chose their own bedchambers and went in them to rest, refresh, and change out of their travel clothes before eating. The bedchamber John had chosen was airy and spacious. He did not have many clothes with him, having left most everything behind in King's Landing save what he needed most. Not that he had taken much to King's Landing from Starfall to begin with. He and Arthur had taken much of their winnings from the tournament and archery contests with them from King's Landing, but had also left a great amount behind in the safekeeping of the Hand and Red Viper. He stripped out of his dirty clothes, filled a wash basin with the water from a pitcher on the stand in a corner of the room, and used a sponge to clean away the filth of travel. It was a relief to be clean again after days on end of riding in the hot summer sun. He had been able to handle the days of riding well. His half-sister, Sansa, and her friend Jane had been considerably less pleasant about the days of riding. Neither of his half-sisters had been happy to learn that their father had sent them from the city. They had both been angry and suspicious, even after Lord Beric had shown them their father's letter. Lord Stark had explained that sending them from the city without any word was for their own safety, as King's Landing was growing too dangerous for their presence. Arya had attempted to ride back on 2 separate occasions. After that, she had been forced to ride double. She would ride with Alysanne for a few hours and then with Arthur or John. Arya had at least seemed to enjoy the riding. She was also pleased that Ciri O'Forel had chosen to accompany them as well. She was finally allowed to ride on her own again after a solid week of riding doubled with one of her siblings. Her mood had improved since she had been riding on her own again. She had spent much of her time speaking with Edric, Arthur, Ciri, and Alysanne. Sansa and Jane had not resisted the journey, though both had complained greatly in the beginning. After a week, they had become mostly silent companions in the journey. John and Alis were occasionally able to elicit smiles from the girls, but otherwise there was not much they could do to improve their moods. After washing, John found some clean clothes in his travel bags and dressed. It was a pleasant feeling to be clean and in clean clothing again. He left the room so that he might eat. Edric and Arya were already seated at the table, filling their mouths with the piles of food. "Don't make yourself sick," little sister Jon said with a laugh. She grinned at him. She had not bothered washing or changing out of her travel clothes. I won't. Edric promised to show me around the castle. Jon seated himself beside her and laughed as he grabbed some of the food for himself. You should both change and wash before you explore the castle. Instead of a lord and a highborn girl, they might mistake you for serving staff. Why would we change before we explore? Arya complained, not hindered by his rebuke. All we will have to do is change again when we return, and I don't have many clothes. Edric nodded in agreement with Arya. Besides which, they know me here as the Lord of Starfall. They do, Lord Dane, Jon replied with a laugh. I was only teasing. What do you want to show my little sister? The gallery and the storm tower so that she can see the mountains of Dawn. Are the mountains in Dawn really red? They are, Jon replied, a bit wistful at the thought of home. She pursed her lips together, pondering. Why? Edric looked at her as though she had asked the strangest question ever uttered. Jon merely shrugged. I do not know. Perhaps the Maesters do. Edric and Arya smiled at one another conspiratorially. We should go see Maester Wyman when we are done eating, he suggested. She pushed away from the table, a crust of bread still in her hand. I'm done. All three of them laughed. Edric grabbed a roll, drained his glass of water, and stood. He then led the rather impatient Arya from the room. Arthur emerged from his room not too long after their departure. He joined Jon at the table, and also helped himself to the food. They spoke as they ate. When he was finished, Arthur informed him that he was going to rest for an hour or so. Jon was glad of that, for he had decided that he wanted time alone in the castle gardens to think and reflect. The gardens within the castle walls were watered from springs within the castle. From the springs, canals and channels had been made to direct the water into the castle and through the gardens. It was a peaceful, quiet place, where the herbs grew sweet and the birds nested in the trees. Jon seated himself beneath a cedar tree and breathed in the cool air of the gardens. He thought back to King's Landing, to Prince Oberyn's last words to him. The prince's commands had been straightforward and simple, until his last request to Jon alone. When you see my brother, tell him that it is time. He will understand what I mean. Now go, take your sisters to safety in Dawn. Jon had no idea what Prince Oberyn could have meant by it is time, but he would do his duty, as was expected of him. He also thought upon their sudden departure from King's Landing. What had their father been doing that caused him to send them all south? Was whatever he had done the reason for all of the bannermen who were encamped outside of Blackhaven? If it had just been Jon and his brother and sister, he would have assumed that their father no longer wanted them around. Yet they had all been sent at the same time from King's Landing with Lord Beric and his men as escorts. Not that Jon thought his father capable of sending away his children for no reason. In the time they had spent together, Lord Stark had always been available to speak with each of his children. He had asked Jon about his interests, goals, and plans for the future. Jon had answered his father truthfully, he had not put much thought into his future. Jon knew that in a few years Edric would be an adult and receive all of his rights as Lord of Starfall, and he could remove Jon and his siblings from Starfall if he so chose. Not that Edric would ever do such a thing, but it was within his rights. Jon knew that House Martell would welcome him into their service. He knew that he wanted to be a knight, but beyond that he had not thought much upon the future. Well, other than Tyen. He had thought about the future he could have with her. He had thought of marrying her, of raising a family with her. Yet he had no idea what she truly wanted. Did she still want him, or had her interests moved on to someone else? He hoped that she still wanted him. He wanted to see her again, to kiss her, to tell her that being apart hurt worse than anything else in the world. Did any of that truly matter? Even if she did love him, they were just bastards. He had no lands or titles and would have none unless they were granted to him by a lord such as his father or her uncle. He could earn titles and glory as a knight. He could be worth of her hand. In the midst of his reverie, Tyle, one of the maids, approached him. She was around 17 years of age, a lovely girl who was in service to Sir Indondarion, the younger sister of Beric and Rylan. He had spoken with her on several visits between Illyria and Beric. She was pretty, and at times Jon thought she knew how lovely she was to look upon. Yet her beauty could not compare to the one he loved. "Hello John, Lord Beric wants to speak with you. It seems quite urgent." He stood quickly, knowing that Lord Beric would probably be telling them why the soldiers were at the castle. At least, that was his assumption. "Thank you, shall I go to Lord Beric's solar?" "Aye, the larger one near the library." "Thank you Tile." With that, he bowed his head to acknowledge her words, and walked away. The walk to the solar was not terribly far, and he knew the halls relatively well. When he arrived, Alysanne, Arthur, Edric, Lord Beric, Lord Rylan, and Lady Soryn were all present. He wondered why they were gathering, but he learned nothing until his half-sisters arrived as well. "I know that we have just arrived," Lord Beric began, "however, letters arrived here during our journey south which will require our immediate attention. It seems that since our departure from King's Landing that King Robert Baratheon died due to wounds which he sustained during his hunt." Jon heard Sansa and Lady Soryn gasp. That King Robert had died so suddenly, truly was a shock. He listened as Lord Beric continued. "It seems that upon the king's death that a coup was staged." To that, Arthur, Jon, and Arya all tried to speak at once but were silenced by Lord Beric. "The coup ousted the former Queen Cersei, and her children. They have been decried as bastards born of incest between the Lady Cersei and her twin brother Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer." Arya muttered something under her breath, at which Sansa looked both nauseous and offended. Their quiet bickering was silenced as they learned more. "Lord Renly Baratheon has been declared King of the Seven Kingdoms. He has the support of your father, Lord Eddard of House Stark, Prince Doran of House Martell, and Lord Mace of House Tyrell. King Renly has also called his bannermen to arms and all of his lords are to send forces to support him in King's Landing." "Did father really support Lord Renly?" Sansa questioned. Lord Beric bowed his head affirmatively. "His seal and signature are affixed to the decree of succession, Lady Sansa." Alysanne gazed at Lord Beric, puzzled. "Isn't Lord, or rather King, Renly the third son? What of Lord Stannis Baratheon?" He sighed. "There is no mention of Lord Stannis. Though I can tell you that he is a wearisome man, and would make a terrible king. Oh, he would be a better ruler than King Robert was, but in the end someone would slit his throat in his sleep for being so harsh and unbending. Renly is a good man, and will be a good king if we can keep the throne in his favor." There was silence in the room as the children stared at Lord Beric with wide eyes and open mouths. It was seldom that a person was so blunt before them, especially regarding such weighty concerns. House Dondarrion is sword to Storm's End and, by virtue of that fact, to King Renly. It is our solemn duty to support and defend our liege lord. As such, I shall be sending our forces to King's Landing. Rylan will be departing from Blackhaven with our assembled bannermen 2 days hence. I shall be departing at the same time with some of my men to meet with the Dornish and Reach forces which are assembling at Night Song. I will be leading the swords from Starfall after I wed Lady Illyria at Night Song. After we are wed, she will come here to be established as the Lady of Blackhaven. The Lady Ashera and Lucas will be arriving with her." He paused for a moment, allowing the children to absorb everything that he had told them. "As for the rest of you, Jon, you will be departing on the morrow. Prince Doran and Prince Oberyn have both sent letters requiring your presence at Sunspear. You will be traveling to Wyl where you will take a ship to Sunspear. Alysanne, you have been appointed as the guardian for your half-sisters. You, the ladies Sansa and Arya, as well as any other guests, have been invited to stay at the Water Gardens until all hostilities have ceased. You are also welcome to remain here until your lady mother, brother, and aunt arrive. I would give you leave to remain here. However, I believe that the invitation to the Water Gardens should not be turned down. It would be prudent for all of you to write to your parents regarding your health and safety now that you are here. I would, however, discourage you from mentioning where you are as we are at war and ravens can quite easily be intercepted." He did not say much more, though he did answer their questions and allow each of them to read the letters that he had received. The swiftness of their departure from King's Landing now made sense, however it did not explain all of the questions which had filled Jon's head. Nor did it explain why he was needed in Sunspear. Yet he would go as he was commanded, for that was his duty. He also hoped that maybe he could see Tywin again when he reached the capital of Dorne. Jon departed from Blackhaven the following day with an escort of 10 men. Parting had been difficult. He knew that, with the coming war, he might not see them again. Arthur and Edric were going to be riding with Lord Beric into battle. Jon assumed that he too would join the armies at King's Landing. He might have been young, but he was not so foolish as to believe that he could not die in battle. So they had hugged and kissed in parting, his siblings and cousin whom he had known for his entire life and his half-sisters whom he had known for mere months. His brother, cousin, and the army of House Dondarrion would depart the following day. His sisters would remain at Blackhaven awaiting the arrival of his mother and youngest brother before they departed for the Water Gardens. They would be safe, he believed, and he did pray that someday they might all be united again. Underscore 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 underscore. Waiting was an unbearable task. Waiting in the castle where Elia and her babes had been murdered was maddening. Oberyn Martell knew that patience was important, had everyone not told him that since he was a boy. Now, as he awaited word of King Renly Baratheon's decision, he was as patient as he could muster. Doran's letters had been firm. Arianne was to be queen, nothing less was acceptable. He also suggested that Jon should be wed to one of Oberyn's daughters. To anyone else, the suggestion would have seemed a passing thought, but Oberyn understood the greater implication. To control the last of House Targaryen in favor of House Martell, Jon would have to wed one of Oberyn's daughters. Granted, the children of the Mad King were still somewhere in the world, but there was always a chance that they too were mad. Having watched Jon from his infancy, Doran and Oberyn had every faith in his sanity and reasoning. In King's Landing, hours and days had been spent deliberating the possibilities for the future of Westeros. Getting the support of some of the kingdoms had not been difficult. With Renly had come the loyalty of the Stormlands. With Oberyn's presence, Prince Doran's support had been a simple task to ensure. With Lord Stark's support had come the North. Through Lord Stark's marriage had come ties to the Vale and Riverlands. From Lady Arryn there had been no reply. Several Vale lords had not decided to await the lady's wishes and had begun to swear allegiance by Raven. Lord Royce was among the lords who had assisted in the coup, and he had sent word to Runestone that their men should come to support their king. Lord Edmure Tully had responded to the change of sovereignty with a terse reply that he would kneel before the king who could get the bloody lions out of the Riverlands. Edmure's response had made Renly laugh, a welcomed change from the somberness which had shrouded the new king since the day of his ascension. Not that his demeanor was unexpected. With a dead brother, a dead lover, and an impending war with the Lannisters, the newly appointed king certainly had enough reasons to be somber. The Tyrells had granted their support by way of letter and the arrival of Garland Tyrell, second son of Lord Mace Tyrell. He was sent to negotiate the desires of his house on behalf of his father, who was gathering the armies of the Reach for their march to King's Landing. The desires of House Tyrell were quite obvious, at least to a man like Oberyn. They wanted the crown for their daughter. A plan which conflicted with a very similar desire in House Martell. Such matters were what the king was now deliberating. Marriage, for a man such as him the matter would be one of politics and little else. While the Tyrells were richer in lands and resources, they had not been there to seat Renly upon the throne. The discussion had been long and drawn out between the king, Lord Stark, Sir Garland, Lord Varys, and Oberyn himself. They were all in agreement that a marriage alliance would be the best way to cement the bonds between the southern kingdoms. Tyrell had pushed for his sister to be Renly's bride. Yet Oberyn had been quick to remind them all that it was Elia Martell whose children should have sat upon the Iron Throne. Her niece would be a just choice for queen. The Lady Margaery would be a fair bride for Prince Quentyn. Such an arrangement would create strong ties between all three kingdoms. If Margaery were to wed Quentyn and Arianne were to wed Renly, their offspring would be royal cousins. Throughout all of the discussions, the king had remained quiet. He had listened intently to all of their arguments. Eventually, he had dismissed everyone so that he could weigh his options alone. So Oberyn waited, stalking the halls and courtyards of the Red Keep, while the king pondered the future. The future. Such an uncertain thing, the future. He did not often like to think upon it. War was a certainty with the Lannisters. Already their forces were reported as having split into two masses. One force remained in the Riverlands, under the command of Sir Jaime Lannister. The second force was on its way south under the command of Lord Tywin Lannister. The lords of the Stormlands and Reach were already amassing in and around King's Landing. Hopefully enough men-at-arms would arrive by the time Lord Tywin's forces arrived at King's Landing. Dorne would send its naval forces in support soon, though they did have concerns about Lord Stannis Baratheon on Dragonstone. Lord Stannis had denounced his brother's ascension to the throne. Renly had replied to his brother, declaring that the will of the people had made him king as it had for Robert. They had not yet received a response. Lord Varys found him as he walked along the outer battlements of the Red Keep. He remembered the first time he had walked there. Elia had been Rhaegar's wife for less than half a year, and she was not yet accustomed to her life as future queen. It was upon this wall where she had told him that she was with child. She had been so happy and he had shared in her joy. His sweet sister. "May we talk?" Varys asked as he approached. "If you wish," Oberyn replied with a sigh. He approached and spoke in a low, hushed tone, not that his voice could have been heard over the wind which gusted strongly across the wall. "I know that your desire is to place Princess Arianne upon the throne, but what if Renly should choose Lady Margaery instead? Then Arianne shall be wed to Lord Willers Tyrell. Was that not the general consensus?" A thin smile. "It was, however I know that is not the desire of your house." He turned to face the man, his back pressed against the wall. "I desire many things which are impossible. Nothing will restore my sister and her children to me. The mountain is dead, yet two still remain. It was you who told my brother and I that Amory Lorque was responsible for the murder of Rhaenys. It was Tywin Lannister who was responsible for both of those monsters. With their heads laid at my feet, at my brother's feet, shall our blood debt be repaid." He bowed his head briefly. "Yet it is not only their deaths which we have worked toward. It is also the boy's future which has been worked for." Oberyn smiled ever so slightly at the eunuch. "I sent word to my brother that the boy should wed one of my daughters, a bastard for a bastard. Even if his birth should come to light, his legitimacy is impossible to prove or disprove. His blood is enough for some to rally behind. Who would rally behind a dragon's bastard? Lord Stark has given his blessing on a match between the boy and one of my girls. I support the match as well. He and my daughter Tyenn are quite fond of one another. If she does not want the match, then he can be wed to my daughter Elia." He laughed bitterly. "My sister might have found humor in that. She did have a rather dark humor." Varys sighed heavily, sorrow visible in his visage. "I do recall that, my lord." "Yet you could not save her," he hissed. "No one could save her, not from Aerys Targaryen nor Tywin Lannister. Queen Rhaella wanted Elia and her children to go to Dragonstone. If they had, then they would have lived and we could have watched over them." The man's tone remained calm, even obsequious. "Neither Doran nor I would have allowed their exile." Varys sighed wearily. "I do not doubt that, my lord, yet now is not a time to discuss what might have been but what can be. Will you choose to tell the boy the truth, and if so, what will be done? So few of us know the truth, Lord Varys. Lord Stark, Lord Reed, you, my brother, myself, Lady Ashera, and the nursemaid Wyler. The secret can die with us if it needs to." The spider cocked his head to the side, considering. And what if the boy should have a child who resembled his father? Violet eyes would be easy enough to ignore, his supposed mother has them, but silver hair like his father is much more difficult to explain away. The Danes have Targaryen blood. So do the Martells and Baratheons, but it would be hard to know that from looking upon any in your family or theirs. "You seem rather concerned about the fate of the boy," he replied shortly. "Are you?" came the hasty retort. He breathed deep, in and out. He thought about the boy, about Jon. He had hated him when he had first seen him. A mere babe, and yet he represented a great offense against Elia. Yet Ashera had persuaded him to keep the boy safe. As he watched Jon grow, he had become truly impressed by the boy. He was the quietest of the three eldest desert wolves, a term Ashera had used for her children since their infancy. He had a quick mind and a great deal of talent for weapons and strategy. He was not as inclined toward business and numbers as Alysanne was, nor was he as reckless as Arthur. Jon had been a pleasure to train, mold, and help raise. He was actually quite fond of the idea that the boy could be his son by marriage. I have raised him as I would a son. His fate is of great concern to me, which is why I am having him wed one of my daughters. Then it would also be wise of you and Lord Stark to tell him the truth now. He is young enough to see how dangerous a coup is, how important support is. He may come to forgive the secrecy and lies of his birth if he learns them now, if he learns that he has been kept safe by the lies. Perhaps he may even gain the good graces of King Renly and ask for the Targaryens to return from exile. Why would Renly ever allow them to return? As a matter of goodwill. If he is the king we hope for him to be, then he will be able to restore balance to this country. Part of that balance could be in allowing 2 exiled children a place to call home. Then they could be wed to whomever he chose and watched as he pleases. Oberyn regarded the man curiously. Why did the Targaryens matter so much to the man? It is a matter to consider. Yet for the moment there are greater concerns than the return of 2 exiles. He did not seem pleased by the response, but he acquiesced instead of pressing the matter. Indeed. I shall leave you to your walk, Prince Oberyn. He watched the eunuch shuffle away, curious as to what schemes were forming in the man's head. Why would he want the Targaryen children to return? Though the spider's whispers had always been of help, he had hardly been pushing for the Targaryen restoration. He too had bid for patience, for caution. Jon could never learn the truth. The Targaryens could never be restored and would likely never be returned. With a sigh he turned to watch the gulls flying in the bay. He thought of Elia and her children. He thought of Lyanna Stark and her son. He thought of the man who had fathered both of their children. The Silver Prince whose passions had torn the kingdom apart. A man whose father had burned lords to death within the halls of the Red Keep. He closed his eyes and in a moment could see the crown of blue roses fall onto Lyanna Stark's lap. He could see Elia's cold sorrow at the loss of her husband's love. He could see the young man who was the result of so many wrongs. Jon was a good boy. He did not doubt the boy's courage, intellect, or tenacity. Yet the throne was not for him. The throne was never to have been for him. The throne should have been Aegon's. The throne should have belonged to the blood of House Martell. Perhaps, soon, that particular wrong would be righted. Given the right circumstances and at the right time, perhaps Jon could be told the truth of his parentage, but not now. There was no support for House Targaryen now. Should the need ever arise for him to be told the truth, he should first be wed to a Martell so that he could bring no further offense against Elia's house. The betrothal pact between Arianne and Jon could be destroyed without a soul ever knowing of its existence. It was hours later when King Renly assembled his counselors together again. He had made his decision. In the name of justice and as a reward for the assistance in his ascension, he would wed Princess Arianne Martell. He had drafted a formal decree for the marriage contract as well as a second contract between House Tyrell and Martell for a betrothal between the Lady Margaery Tyrell and Prince Quentyn Martell. The 2 betrothal contracts were signed by all councillors who were present. Given the fact that a hostile army was heading to King's Landing, both marriages would take place after the Lannister armies were subdued. It was a victory for House Martell. Princess Arianne would become Queen of Westeros. The only obstacle was the Lannisters. Though Oberyn could not see how Lord Tywine expected to win a fight when so outnumbered. So he would wait until the armies arrived. With a smile on his lips, he realized that he could wait for war. He could wait a few more short months to see Tywine Lannister dead. Underscore 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 underscore. The journey by sea to Sunspear was far swifter than by land. Jon had made the journey more than once from Starfall, and had always enjoyed the journey. Arthur was the only one in the family who preferred to make the journey by land as sea travel churned his stomach. Jon found that there was a certain peace which he could draw from the seas that was more difficult to find on land. The journey took less than a week from Wyl. The winds were strong and the weather fair as they sailed the Sea of Dawn, around the Broken Arm, and finally to Sunspear. He loved Sunspear. He loved the mud brick walls of the Shadow City. He loved the smell of spice in the air. He loved the towers of the old palace. So different was Sunspear from Starfall, Old Town, or King's Landing, but it was wonderfully different. Upon arriving at the palace, he met with the steward. The steward escorted him to Sir Mamfrey Martell, and Sir Mamfrey escorted him to Prince Doran's private solar. Prince Doran was seated in his rolling chair, gazing out of a window when John arrived. Ero Hotter was standing close to the door, a quiet and imposing presence who guarded over the ruler of Dawn. When he was inside the room, John walked to his prince and knelt before him. "My lord." "John, it is good to see you again." The Prince of Dawn's voice was soft and weary. He indicated for John to be seated, so he rose and seated himself upon a bench near Doran. "How was your journey?" John laughed. "It was long, my lord. However, there were no difficulties along the way." Doran nodded his head slowly. His words came even slower. "That is good to hear. Tell me, what was the last news you had of King's Landing?" "King Robert has died and Renly Baratheon is now king. Lord Dondarrion allowed us to read the decrees which had come forth from the king, my father, and Prince Oberyn. I left Blackhaven a day after we arrived so that I could respond to your summons." He paused, anxious to know if Prince Oberyn's words would truly make sense. "Before leaving King's Landing, Prince Oberyn told me that I must tell you it is time. He said that you would understand what it meant." Doran Martell's expression darkened. "I do understand." Anger tinged his voice, however, he was wrong. Now is not the time. He sighed deeply, his head hanging low for a moment before he looked at John with a much more peaceful expression. "It is no matter now, for the issue to which he was referring is irrelevant at this time. There are, however, other concerns, other ravens which have flown. My daughter shall be queen." John felt his jaw go slack. Evidently much had happened since he had left King's Landing. "That is wonderful to hear, my lord." The man's lips pressed tight together. "I am glad that my blood will sit upon the throne as it was meant to, yet I am ever wary of sending those whom I love to that city. When the Lannisters are subdued, my eldest children will go to King's Landing so that alliances may be formed through marriage. Arianne shall be queen, and Quentyn shall wed Margaery Tyrell. He shall become my heir. An alliance such as bound the North, Riverlands, and Vale." Doran affirmed the question with a nod of his head. "It was Lord Stark's suggestion, and all parties have agreed that this arrangement is the most beneficial and just arrangement of alliances. As a way of uniting the North to the crown, a match has been proposed between yourself and one of my nieces. My brother and daughter have both spoken of a fondness between yourself and Tyon. She has been spoken to of this matter, but has declined to make any decisions at this time." John's mouth went dry. A match between himself and Tyon. Such a thought was overwhelming. "If it please you and Prince Oberyn, as well as Tyon, I should gladly accept such a proposal." A soft smile lighted across his face. "It does please myself and my brother. It is Tyon whom you must convince. Failing her acceptance, you will wed one of my other nieces. As there are no other matches which would be possible at this time due to age or impropriety of birth, it is important to our houses that this match take place." I understand, my lord. I shall do my duty and wed as is desired by my lords and my parents." "Good," he replied with a nod of his head. "There is one further matter before I dismiss you. By week's end, we shall be sending ships with our armies from Sunspear to King's Landing. You, as well as my eldest two nieces, shall be traveling with them to join the armies of the Stormlands and Reach. It will be my honor to serve, my lord. Remember that wars are bloody things. Would that wars could cease." He sighed heavily. "Now go, seek out my niece that you may resolve the issue of your betrothal." "Of course, my lord." John knelt again before the Prince of Dawn, and kissed his hand before he left the room. John's mind and heart were racing when he left the room. He could wed Tyon, his beautiful, wonderful sand snake. At least, he could wed her if she chose to marry him. He did not find the idea of wedding one of her sisters quite so appealing. He supposed that he should find Arianne before Tyon, so that he might congratulate the Princess of Dawn for her betrothal. He also thought that it might be a wise idea to learn where his rooms were or to freshen up after such a long journey, but he wanted to find Tyon. As he sought his beloved's location, his thoughts also turned to the future battles in which he must fight. He knew that Arthur and Edric would be in the fighting as well, under Lord Beric's command. It was only right that Jon, as their elder, should be in the fight as well. The thought also struck him that should he die, or Arthur, that they had not even said their farewells to their mother or youngest brother. Nor had they said farewell to their father. If they died in battle, their parents would never see them alive again. He shuddered at the thought and pushed it away so that he might find Tyen. He eventually learned where she was, and found Tyen reading in one of the large, airy rooms which overlooked terraced courtyards of the old palace. She was robed in blue silk which was trimmed with silver. His breath caught when he looked at her, and at the smile which shone on her face when she looked up at him. Tai he greeted, his heart in his throat. She looked up from her book, laid it aside, and a smile illumined her face. I had heard that you were here, my sweet. I have missed you. I have missed you as well. Have you heard our prince's suggestion? He asked with some trepidation. Her nose wrinkled ever so slightly. Suggestion implies that our fathers have not already stated their intended conclusion. I read the letters. My father and yours wish for us to wed. Or, should I refuse, that you wed my sister Elia? He found himself at a loss for words. Did she not want him? He swallowed the lump in his throat. Are you opposed to such a match? The ghost of a smile flickered on her lips. She motioned for him to sit beside her, which he did readily. I am opposed to you marrying my sister, any of my sisters. As for myself, I am upset that my father is forcing this. He has never before cared about whom I or any of my sisters favor. Nor has he ever planned a match for any of us. He always told us that we could wed if we chose, but that he would not defend us if we chose poorly, for he had trained us to handle ourselves in such matters. She softened then, raising a hand to his cheek. I am not opposed to you. She pressed her lips softly to his for a brief moment. I am opposed to losing my freedom. He replied fervently and quickly. I would never deny you anything. She laughed. Yes, you would, and with good reason. As we now stand, I can go where I wish, with whomever, for however long, and no one can say anything against it save my father. Should we wed, I doubt that you would allow such a thing. He was at a loss for words. Would you not want to only be with me? She cocked her head to the side, golden strands of her hair strayed across her face. He hated the expression she had, it made him feel incredibly young compared to her. He was younger than her, but hated the reminder. I need to consider the possibilities. She kissed him again, soft and quick. She stood, and stepped away, smiling sweetly. I must go to the September. The September. To pray for guidance, my sweet. Oh, of course. I was born in a September. I suppose that makes me closer to the gods in a way. I often find clarity when I am in their presence. Should I not seek them about such matters as marriage? Not waiting for a reply, she bent to him and pressed her lips to his again before she turned to leave. Her movements were slow and precise as she walked away. Jon was at a loss for what he should be thinking or feeling. His beautiful Tyen, did she want him or not? Would she even give an answer before he left to fight in the impending war? Notes. Content warning. Mild self-injury. In the third POV. Underscore 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 underscore. You should give him your answer before he leaves. Arianne Martell murmured gently. They were curled together in Arianne's chambers, the future queen of Westeros and her cousin of the same age, who may as well have been her twin sister for all that they shared. I know, Tyen replied. I just don't know what my answer will be. The poor boy has been waiting for days. It's cruel, sweeterling. She giggled. You have, at times, been far crueler. I am a woman betrothed now, and can do no cruelty toward my betrothed and king. You could. If he tries to harm you, I shall place tears in his wine so that he can never harm you again. Tears. Tears of lies, a poison which has neither taste nor color. When used it mimics a sickness of the bowels, leading to death. Ty. Arianne gasped, pulling away from her cousin. Tyen's expression was pure and guileless. You have asked me to be one of your companions. I would be remiss if I did not protect you at all times. You are wicked. She smiled, laying back against the bed. I am my father's daughter. Shall you do as your father has bid? Ariane sat so that she was looking down upon her cousin. I will give John my decision before he leaves. She laughed at her cousin's doubtful gaze. Truly, I will. I can hardly avoid the docks today as my sisters shall depart for King's Landing with him. Can I know your answer? My dear uncle shall know first, then John. Ariane's expression was ponderous. Why is it so difficult for you to choose John? He is a good man. He is smart, kind, and brave. His adoration of you is obvious to all. Tien pressed her lips together, thoughtful. He is so young. That hardly mattered when at first you bedded him. Why does it matter now? Bedding and wedding are not the same things. To wed is till death. Ariane frowned. Unless you are like my mother and abandon your children to return home. Tien reached up and squeezed Ariane's arm. Norphos is far away, sweeterling. Yet I could not travel so far as that from him. We are both of dawn, and nowhere could we be parted long amongst the sands of our home. 'Tis his youth I doubt, not my forbearance. What of his youth makes you wary? The fickleness of young hearts worries me. He loves me now, that much is true, but will he love me a year from now? Will he love me 10 years from now? You are to wed without thought to such matters. I never had such an expectation until recent events. Today is all that matters, sweeterling. Tomorrow may never come. For we shall die amid the endless waves, forever young and forever loved, she quoted with a wistful sigh. 'Tis such a lovely poem, even with the lovers' deaths. Sighing again, Tien moved away from Ariane and off the bed. Ariane moved to sit upon the edge of the bed. I must decide sooner rather than later. She pressed a kiss to Ariane's brow. I shall see you later. Tien left Ariane's room and walked slowly across the length of the palace. What choice should she make? She cared for John. They had known one another since she was a child. They had trained together. They had spent many hours talking and laughing. She remembered the first time he had kissed her. They had been walking along the coast near the water gardens, near evening. They had been gathering shells so that the jewelers could fashion them into charms. Their siblings had returned to the common areas of the water gardens instead of joining their walk, leaving them alone. She had fallen during their walk, and he had knelt beside her shortly thereafter, to ensure that she was unhurt. She recalled that she had smiled at him and had assured him that she was fine. His response had been sweet. He had expressed his gladness that she was unharmed and then had brushed stray strands of her hair from her face. Then, she did not quite remember how, they had started kissing. She leaned against the cool stone walls of Sunspear, confused. She loved his kisses, his touches. He was sweet, eager, gentle, a good fighter, and all that she could possibly wish for in a husband. Why did she resist? Why did she hesitate? With a start, she knew. It was not John she resisted, though she did doubt the longevity of his love simply due to his youth. The problem wasn't love. The problem wasn't marriage. The problem was her father. She wanted to know why. She understood that alliances were important. Yet what benefits were there to a bastard alliance? If anything, it would be more sensible to betroth one or both of Lord Stark's legitimate daughters to Prince Tristan and Willers Tyrell. What purpose would wedding two bastards provide? Why now? John was already of Dawn. If anything, the match was a mere token gesture. Surely if Lord Stark gave a good enough dowry, even Alysanne could wed a high-born lord. Tien knew that lords chose spouses for their children all the time. Her father had never made such a demand of his girls until now. So why decide that she must wed John? And yet, if John went to war and died? She ached at the thought of him dying. She could not bear the thought of him going to war without knowing that she cared for him. She continued to her destination, the September. She needed one last prayer before she made a firm decision. When she opened the doors of the September, she saw him kneeling before the warrior. His head was bowed in solemn prayer. His sword lay upon the feet of the statue. She knew her answer when he turned and noticed her. Have I disrupted your prayers? No, I just finished. He stood. His eyes were a mix of hurt and confusion. I shall pray daily that the seven keep you and protect you during your time away. He gave her a half smile. Thank you. I suppose that I should leave you to your prayers. He stood, strapping on his sword. He turned from her to leave. She knew that she had to tell him now. John. He stopped. I need to talk to you. He turned to her again. She breathed deep, there was no turning back from this moment. Yes, she whispered. Yes. His face displayed nothing but confusion. She stepped closer to him. I have decided to accept the proposal. You. Oh, he was beautiful when he was shocked and happy. His smile shone like the sun. Yes, John, I will marry you. He closed the gap between them, and lifting her in the air, kissed her hard. Oh, how she had missed kissing him. The urgent longing which filled his every movement was intoxicating. She could lose herself in the sweet taste of him. She was breathless when he pulled away. I couldn't bear to have you depart without telling you my answer. I was afraid that you would scorn my affection, that you would reject the betrothal. I will never and have never scorned your affection. I find the thought of another calling you husband distasteful. For that shall be my pleasure, and I do not think that I should like to share you. He grinned. You wanted to share me with my sister. She laughed. That was before I was to be wed. He kissed her again and she felt herself fill with warmth. She pulled away from his lips but they clung to one another. We should stop, my sweet, she breathed against his skin. I would not want for our first child to be conceived as I was. He cocked his head to the side. As you were. In a September. He laughed and shook his head. Your father has had some interesting experiences. She smirked. Perhaps you should have him tell you of my mother one day. You should meet her as well. I think she would like you. Where is she? She serves the faith at the Septas house near Golden Grove. I have not seen her for several years, though we write to one another regularly. You must miss one another terribly. She pulled back a little. When we first parted I was still a babe. It has been difficult at times, but I have grown accustomed to living away from her. Now why don't we go and tell my sweet uncle of our decision? Now. He ran his fingers along her spine. Oh, she knew quite well what he wished for instead of seeing the Prince of Dawn. Yes, my sweet, he needs to know my decision. Reluctantly he agreed and pulled away from her. Did you not come here to pray? He asked, delaying. With a smile she kissed his cheek. I did, and upon my arrival the gods gave me the answer I needed. She found his hand with hers and tugged. Come, my sweet, my uncle awaits a response. She walked toward the door of the September and he followed behind her, his fingers laced with her own. Underscore 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 underscore. Prince Doran Martell readily gave his blessing to Tyann and John's betrothal. She thought it likely that this was by far the swiftest thing her uncle had ever done. They bowed to him, spoke a few words, and were dismissed with his blessing. They passed the remaining hours before the ships were to leave in John's chambers. While they did spend time packing his belongings into chests, they spent much of their time abed. In his arms she realized how much she had missed him. She had forgotten how much she enjoyed his kiss, his touch. She had thought him just a passing interesting, yet she felt that she could enjoy being his wife. She could learn to want him more. Eventually they dressed again, slowly. Perhaps they should have been swifter to dress, but neither was willing to hurry the other. Are you trying to miss the departure of the ships? She teased from the bed. He was searching for a missing boot, to no avail. I am trying to find all of my belongings, wherever you lost them. She giggled. It is hardly my fault that you lost your boot somewhere in here, your shirt as well. He turned to her and grinned. You are laying upon my shirt. Looking down he smiled. He took a few paces toward the bed, and bending down, found his boot beneath the bed. He sat upon the bed to put on and lace his boot, but was interrupted by Tyann wrapping her arms around him and kissing his neck. He shrugged her away, though she could feel his reluctance to do so. If you don't stop that I will truly miss the ships, and then what will your father think of allowing us to wed? She pulled away with a soft sigh. I would not want my sisters to think you a craven who flees from war. When he had finished lacing his boot, he turned and leaned down, kissing her hard and then soft upon the lips. When he pulled away, he pulled his shirt from beneath her. I would not want that either. Though I do not relish the prospect of traveling to King's Landing with your sisters. They will do you no harm, I promise. He raised a brow at her, doubtful. John. She allowed the word to linger long upon her lips. Truly, my sisters will be kind to you. He stood and held a hand out to her so that she would stand. I think they will make my life terribly difficult while we travel together. She giggled and slid from the bed. That is likely. She picked up her gown from the floor and slid it on, pulling the laces tight, so that she appeared pure and innocent again. She walked to the vanity and used one of the combs to smooth her hair. She then pulled back her hair and tied it with a blue silk cord. She turned to him, pensive. Are you ready? His smile was shy. As ready as I will ever be. She walked to him and laced her fingers in his. Then we should go to the docks. No doubt one of the stewards has been waiting to take your belongings to the ship. He agreed, and together they walked from the room. Sure enough, a steward and 4 young men were waiting to carry John's chest to the docks so that it could be loaded onto the ship. John told the men that he was ready for them to take his things to the ships. They walked to the docks hand in hand. She knew that he was anxious by the way he gripped her hand. She did nothing to pull away from him. Though she had been raised to fight and defend herself and her loved ones, it had almost always been a theory. Other than a few drunken brawlers at the taverns in various cities, their lives had never been endangered. Today she would send people whom she loved to war. The docks were already teeming with men and women when they arrived. Prince Doran and Princess Ariane were seated upon a raised platform, guarded by Areo Hotter and other swordsmen. Obera and Nymeria were standing on the platform, laughing with Ariane. Tyen felt John grip her hand tighter as they approached the platform. She did not envy his impending journey with her sisters. Ariane beamed when she laid her eyes upon Tyen and John. Father informed me of your decision, Ariane said in greeting as the guards allowed them to pass onto the platform. It seems you were too busy after that decision was made to tell myself or your sisters. Tyen and John dipped to their knees briefly to Doran before replying to Ariane. It was my duty to farewell my betrothed before he departs for war. She smiled innocently at her cousin and spared a brief glance at John, whose cheeks were tinged pink. He was handsome in his travel attire, with his hair pulled back and tied at the nape of his neck. Obera, Nymeria, and Ariane laughed. I trust that he will long remember your parting, cousin. Tyen giggled as she watched the flush of red spread down John's neck. She did not doubt that he would remember her farewell. Her body still ached from their love-making, and likely would for most of the next day. Doran interrupted their repartee with a gentle cough. I am certain that the 2 of you will have much time to discuss the matter later. For now we must bid farewell to our soldiers as well as these 3 who are so dear to us. In agreement, Tyen released John's hand and stood beside Ariane while John, Obera, and Nymeria knelt before Doran and Ariane. The 3 of you will go to war today. You will join my brother Oberyn and the forces of the south to fight against the Lannisters. They have long been our enemies and the time has come to seek our vengeance. Fight well, my brother's daughters. Fight well, John. May the winds be strong and the seas fair for your journey. Go with my blessing, Doran charged them. Fight for Dawn. Fight for House Martell, unbowed, unburnt, unbroken. Unbowed, unburnt, unbroken, Obera and Nymeria echoed in one voice, uttering the words of House Martell. While I breathe, I hope, John said, claiming the words of House Dane. The 3 then stood. Obera and Nymeria kissed Doran, then Ariane, and then Tyen in parting. May your journey be swift and your sword at the ready, Ariane told Obera and Nymeria. They will sing songs of our victory at your wedding feast, my sister and Queen, Obera replied. We will be there to see you wed, Nymeria told Ariane and Tyen. I shall look forward to seeing you both upon your victory, my sisters, Tyen told both of them. She watched her sisters walk down from the platform to the dock where their ship was moored. Maiden's Blush was the name of the 3-masted ship upon which John, Nymeria, and Obera would travel to King's Landing, along with a portion of the Dornish army. Jon was next to say farewell. He kissed Prince Doran and Princess Arianne upon their hands before he turned to Tywin. She warmed to see him look upon her, and yet she was struck with a fierce, terrifying ache at the notion of his departure. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him hard. She heard catcalls from the ship and docks as he kissed her possessively. She was his and he was hers, and he seemed to want everyone to know. Not that she cared, she had little shame, though she liked to act as the example of utmost piety in public. He pulled away from her, his eyes impossibly dark. "Don't make me a widow before I am a bride, my sweet. I shall make that my primary endeavor, my love." She kissed him again, soft upon the lips, cheek, and brow. "Good. May the gods grant you favor as you journey on your way." He took her hand in his and kissed it softly. "I do believe that the gods will be so kind." It seemed as though an eternity passed before he finally released her hand and walked toward the ship. Arianne reached for her hand and squeezed. They watched as the last of the people and chests were loaded onto the ship and the gangplank was raised. Oberyn, Nymeria, and Jon all waved to them as the ship began to row away from port. Tywin prayed with her whole heart that the gods would keep all of them safe. Underscore 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 underscore. Arya Stark chewed on her lip for a long while before deciding if she should bother Sansa. Today was her sister's name day. She knew that they should spend some of it together, not that she wanted to see Sansa. She would have preferred to explore more of Blackhaven or to practice with Syrio. She could spend time with Alysanne as well, but Aelys was usually busy assisting Lady Saryn for Lady Illyria's arrival. With Lady Illyria would come Lady Ashera, and thinking of Lady Ashera made Arya feel uncomfortable. Arya had awoken early to make a gift for Sansa. Mother would like that Arya had thought to make a gift for Sansa, so would father. She wanted to prove to her mother and father that she was good when they weren't around. Not that she should be nice to Sansa, it was her fault that they didn't have wolves anymore. She had awoken early and had asked permission to take flowers from the gardens. She had picked Sansa's favorite colors. There were orange, yellow, white, blue, purple, and pink flowers in the vase she brought to her sister. She stood at her sister's door, uncertain. Surely Sansa was awake. She knocked timidly and her sister answered right away. "Yes, who is it?" "Sansa, can I come in?" A pause. "Yes, Arya." Her voice did not seem particularly inviting, but Arya decided to enter anyway. "I picked these for your name day," she announced as she pushed open the door. She held out the flowers to her sister. Sansa was seated upon the edge of her bed, stitching a gown. She turned to her sister and seemed to consider the offer for a moment before she smiled. "Thank you, Arya." She stood and walked to Arya. Her smile brightened as she looked at the flowers. "They are lovely." Her smile faltered and she assumed her mother posture. "Did you ask for permission?" Arya flushed red. Why did her sister have to ask such stupid questions? "Of course I did. Why can't you just say thank you when I do something nice? You aren't mother. You can't me what to do." Angry tears threatened to fall. Why was she crying? She couldn't cry. She wasn't a stupid baby like Rickon. Suddenly Sansa was taking the flowers from her and hugging her. "I know I'm not mother," Sansa whispered, rubbing Arya's back gently. Arya sniffled. Her cheeks were wet, not that she would ever admit such a thing. "I want to go home." She pulled away and dried her eyes with her sleeve. "Don't tell Jane." Sansa shook her head, she was crying too. "I won't tell Jane, but she misses home too." She bit her lower lip as tears leaked slowly from her eyes. "And me, I miss home and mother and father and our brothers." "You wanted us to come here," Arya grumbled. "I was betrothed to the prince and father was made hand of the king. It was lovely at first. You haven't hated all of it either." She chewed on her lip and reluctantly agreed. She loved training with Syrio Forel. She had enjoyed seeing so much of Westeros. She liked her half-brothers and half-sister. But she worried. She worried for Bran and father. She worried for her half-brothers and Edric Dane who were going to join the armies at King's Landing. She worried for Nymeria, who was alone, somewhere in the Riverlands. Will they be safe in King's Landing? Sansa gave a tremulous smile. Father and our half-brothers will be safe. They will be victorious. I'm certain that we will be able to go home then, and we can tell Robb, Bran, and Rickon everything we have seen. Shaking, Arya nodded in agreement. Maybe we can bring Aelys, Jon, and Arthur with us. Sansa pressed her lips together. She looked too much like Mother when she did that. Maybe. She looked at the flowers which she was still holding in one hand and smiled again. Thank you for the flowers, they are really pretty. She walked to a table, which was beneath a window, and placed the vase upon it. They look lovely here, don't you think? Arya grinned. Perfect. Do you want to see if the cooks can make lemon cakes? Sansa giggled. Yes. Come on, let's get Jane. Do we have to? Arya replied with a wrinkled nose. Sansa rolled her eyes. Of course we do. Without us Jane has no one here. Her father is still in King's Landing with our father. Her mother is still at Winterfell. We are all she has. Arya sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed. It was her sister's name a day after all. Fine. They left Sansa's room, and retrieved Jane from her room, before they went to the kitchens to speak with the cooks. They could have asked Alysanne or Lady Saryn or even the steward who took care of their needs, but they knew that if they went to the cooks, they would probably get treats that had just been made. Sure enough, and to the delight of all three girls, the cooks were willing and able to make lemon cakes for the evening meal. They also sent the girls from the kitchen with sweet bread that was filled with cherries and cinnamon. The girls spent the next hour or so walking in the gardens until the time arrived for their lessons. Lady Saryn had asked the Maester if he could make lessons for the girls so that they could continue learning while they were away from their family. Maester Wyman had agreed, so for an hour every morning the three girls were required to practice writing and sums. The next hour was spent with Septa Esmin where they practiced their sewing. Arya liked Septa Esmin more than Septa Mordane. She never scolded Arya when she tangled her threads. The third hour was when Arya would practice with Ciri O'Forel while Sansa and Jane learned how to play the lap harp with Septa Esmin. Arya loved practicing with Ciri. She was learning so much with him. She was quieter, swifter, and more focused. Yet she did not enjoy swordplay as much as she had before. In King's Landing she had spent time practicing swords with Edric, Jon, and Arthur. Now that they were gone away to war, she could not fully rest her heart in the joy of water dancing. She was afraid that she might never see her father or half-brothers again. Underscore 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 underscore. She was pacing again, wearing a path in the floor of the chambers which were her prison. The food which her captors had provided had grown cold, again. How could she eat it? She did not doubt that it was poisoned. Poison would be slow. They could kill her without a sword and trick her father, tell him that she had fallen ill. Her stomach growled and she dug her nails into her forearms. She pressed her nails hard against her flesh, until she could feel something, anything other than hunger. She was staring out the window when she looked down. She could see blood, again. It had crusted on her pale skin, breaking open whenever she touched her arms. Her nails were stained with the blood she had drawn. She had to be careful with the cuts. She did not want an infection. She laughed. The tone seemed strange to her ears. She couldn't be mad. No, she had not broken for Robert Baratheon. She would not break for Renly Baratheon, Eddard Stark, or anyone else. They would not see her break. But they could take her head. She laughed again, choking on the tears that broke free. She was safe, until they decided it was her time to die. Until they took her head and the heads of her children. She almost didn't hear the knock on the door. Or the voice of Lord Stark calling from beyond the door. A moment she called. Did she still sound a queen? Did her voice still speak confidence? She pulled the sleeves of her gown down to her wrists and washed her hands clean in the basin. The blood was still beneath her nails, but she could lie about its cause if needed. She took a clean cloth and wiped her face free of any filth. Looking at her reflection in the glass, she hardly knew herself. She brushed her hair quickly and let it lay loose behind her. At least she was presentable. "You may enter," Cersei Lannister announced as she seated herself upon a chaise. Lord Eddard Stark entered slowly. His leg was still casted, but otherwise he was well dressed and adorned with the badges of his position as Hand of the King. Such an honorable man, Lord Stark. "It is so good to know that the Hand can visit his prisoners," she said bitterly. It had been weeks since her imprisonment had begun and this was his first visit. "I heard that you have scarcely been eating. By the look of your plate, I can see that much is true." His tone was neutral, formal. She could still speak with authority. She was still queen. She had earned her place as queen. Renly Baratheon was merely an usurper. "I am suspicious of food from men who seek my life." He walked to a chair near her and seated himself. "You are not yet condemned to death." She laughed. "Yet, a word that tells me I shall die when it is most in the favor of Renly Baratheon. King Renly Baratheon. King." She mulled over the word. "The king seeks to use me as a means to keep my father in line." He acknowledged her statement with a movement of his head. "You, your children, and your cousins who were within King's Landing at the time of King Robert's death. Your father marches to King's Landing with haste. It would not benefit any for you to be executed. When will it be beneficial, Lord Stark? When will your new king decide that myself and my children are no longer worthy captives? When will you take my head and the heads of my children? Will they line the walls of the castle?" She seethed as she spoke, yet the words seemed to come from someone else. He did not respond to her at first. Instead, he merely looked at her for a long time. "King Renly has already pardoned your children in word and in writing. They are declared bastards but will not be executed for the crimes of their parents. Did I not tell you that I would not see them harmed?" "You did," she agreed quietly. "It has also been decided that when they are of age, they shall be wed to children of lords who are loyal to the crown." She laughed, genuinely laughed. His discomfort spoke volumes for what fate awaited her children. "You will wed my children to your own. Bastards for bastards. My son Arthur will wed Myrcella and Tommen will wed one of Prince Oberyn's girls. The contracts have already been written. Lowborn, bastard weddings. For bastard children." Her jaw clenched. "Such tidy little futures you have designed for my children. Shall Joffrey wed your bastard girl?" He shifted in his seat and breathed deep. "No, your eldest son's fate has yet to be decided." "Why? You seem to have already planned the fate of so many others." "The king is not over fond of your eldest child, neither am I." "Ah, but my younger children are easier for you to control. You can mold them into whatever shape your heart desires." She shook her head. "I am surprised that the Viper agreed to the match. He is in a generous state of mind, his niece shall be queen." She laughed again. If her father did not save her, if Jaime did not save her, the fools would bring about their own destruction. "I pity any woman who is forced to wed a Baratheon. Shall he warm her bed or will she give him bastards? I wonder." He raised a brow, unbaited. "I doubt that Princess Arianne would be so foolish." "Is that what I was, foolish? Foolish to hate a man who loved a dead girl? To hate a man who whored with every woman in King's Landing? The Martell girl will grow to hate Renly Baratheon as much or more than I hated Robert." He ran a hand through his hair, weariness showing through in his responses to her. "Perhaps you are right, however, such matters are beyond my control. My duty is to ensure your health and well-being as a prisoner of the crown." He stood slowly, pained by the movement. "Eat your next meal and you will be allowed a visit from your children. They all miss you and would likely welcome a visit from you." She was slow in responding, and venom seeped into her reply. "How kind of my lord to consider such a courtesy. Will that be all?" He bowed his head. "For now, Lady Cersei." He turned from her and walked to the door. He did not even spare her a second glance when he departed from the room. She considered his words and the cold food upon the bureau. Eating seemed as though she was allowing them to win. Yet she did have her children to think upon. Should they live, she did not want them to think of her as weak. They should know that she was strong enough to thrive, even after being deposed and locked away. She would show them that lions were not to be defeated. Some time later, she stood and walked to the tray. She would eat for her children, she decided. She would not eat to please Ned Stark or Renly Baratheon. She picked a grape from the tray and popped it into her mouth. She would do it for her children. The gates of Blackhaven were opened to them as they arrived. Their travel party was small, 30 people who had ridden from Nightsong to Blackhaven. They had been a larger company when they had departed from Starfall, but their men now followed Lord Beric to King's Landing and war. The party which met them in the courtyard was small as well. Not that a large welcome was expected, though for their new lady, Ashura Dane thought they might have made an exception. Ashura looked to her sister who rode beside her. Illyria was weary of travel, Ashura knew. Her sister had never been much of a rider, she preferred carriages, yet she had ridden the entire way from Blackhaven with no complaint. A perfect lady for a castle. A perfect lady for Beric Dondarrion. Her heart broke for her sister. Illyria should be able to enjoy her new marriage. She should be riding to her new home with her new husband. Yet she rode to her new home while her husband rode north and east to war. Ashura hated that her sister might be a widow so soon after being wed. She hated that Aron's only living child might die beside Lord Dondarrion. She hated that Arthur and Jon could die in battle. She hated that someday she could lose Lucas the same way. She hated war. Wars were inevitable, she knew, but were it her choice, there would be no wars. She knew she should be glad that her boys and nephew were old enough to go to war. So many children died young, but hers had all thrived. Yet what was the point of their thriving through childhood if they would only die upon a sword? If they would not live long enough to love, to wed, to have children of their own? Glancing behind her, she could see Lucas upon his mount. Her last child. Her baby. She could not bear to see him go to war as well. Arthur's departure had been too difficult. She could not watch another one of her children ride to war. If any of them died. The sight of Alysanne standing beside Lady Saryn Dondarrion in the courtyard diverted her dark thoughts. Alysanne's smile was brilliant, illuminating her whole face. Nothing was more precious to Ashura than the smiles of her children, her beautiful babes. Though her daughter was now a lovely young woman, not a babe or a girl. She should be wed soon, Ashura knew, though there had been no thought made toward wedding her daughter to anyone. There were too many people in the yard for Ashura to spur her horse forward any faster than the slow gait at which they were traveling. A few minutes later they reached the grooms. As soon as one of the grooms took the reins of the horse, Ashura slid from her mount. Mere moments later, Ashura was met by Alysanne launching herself into her arms. "My sweet girl," Ashura said, kissing her daughter on both cheeks. She smoothed her daughter's hair with both hands, memorizing her face as though they had not seen one another in years. She was crying and laughing at the same time as she held her little girl. Mama Alis laughed. "I am so glad to see you. Was the wedding lovely? How was your journey?" "All was well, sweeterling. I have missed you greatly." She kissed her cheek again before releasing her so that she could greet Lucas and Illyria, who had both dismounted. Alis turned first to her brother, whom she picked up and spun with her hug. He did not seem thrilled that she was still able to lift him, but he could do little but comply with her actions. "You've grown taller," she exclaimed as she set her brother upon the ground again. "Soon I won't be able to lift you at all." "Good, and I have," he replied as he straightened his clothes. "Mother had the seamstresses make me new shirts and trousers." He shifted the conversation quickly. "Arthur said that our half-sisters are here." Alis nodded slowly. "They are inside. I shall take you to them soon." She turned away from Lucas to greet her aunt with a much more restrained and polite, though no less enthusiastic greeting. "Aunt Illyria, or should I say Lady Dondarrion?" Illyria blushed slightly at her new title. "I shall always be your aunt, sweeterling." She kissed Alysanne on both cheeks in greeting. "And the wedding was lovely, I will be certain to tell you everything later." "Thank you, Alysanne replied, grinning broadly. Illyria then turned to Saryn Dondarrion. "Lady Saryn, it is a pleasure to see you again." Saryn smiled sweetly at her three new guests. "Welcome to your new home, Lady Illyria. It has been a pleasure to prepare Blackhaven for your arrival as its new lady. Welcome to our family." Thank you, Surin. It is a pleasure to be the Lady of Blackhaven, and your brother's wife. The women grasped one another's arms and kissed on the cheek. The pleasure is ours, Illyria. I am glad to see that you, as well as your sister and nephew, have arrived safely. News has arrived which is relevant to both you and Lady Ashura. We can discuss that now if you wish, or after all of you have been settled into rooms. Illyria breathed deep. Ashura wished that she could help her sister, but Illyria was the Lady of Blackhaven, this was her place to make decisions. I think that we should review whatever letters have arrived before we are settled into our rooms. I am certain that Alice should be able to escort her brother to his assigned chambers while all relevant information is discussed with myself and my sister. Of course. Surin turned from Illyria to Alisan and one of the men of House Dondarion. Alice, I trust that with Dalen's help you should be able to show the men of your mother's house where everything should be taken. Yes, Lady Surin, Alice replied readily. Then we will take our leave of you, Surin replied with a brisk nod of her head. Lady Illyria, Lady Ashura, if you will come with me. Ashura turned quickly to her children after she and Illyria acknowledged Surin. Lucas, stay with Alice. Yes, Mama, her son replied. Alisan smiled. I'll be certain to take him to his chambers when everyone is settled. I'm certain that you will, sweeterling. Ashura turned to follow her sister and Surin. She feared that the news Surin would tell them concerned her sons or nephew. She spared a glance back at her children. Lucas seemed somewhat bereft, standing beside his sister. Alisan was already directing the men of Starfall where they should go with the chests that were being unloaded from the wagons. Her daughter seemed so ready and eager to direct her household. Perhaps it was time to begin considering where her daughter's future should lead. They walked through the corridors of the castle until they arrived at the Lord Solar. The desk was littered with several letters. Surin flitted about the room as soon as they arrived. She offered them seats and refreshments. Ashura and Illyria chose to remain standing so that they might stretch their sore muscles, both accepted wine to drink. Surin eventually seated herself upon a cushioned window seat to tell them news of the realm. The letters are upon the desk. You may, of course, read them at your leisure. 2 were forwarded from Starfall, both are written by Lord Eddard Stark. 2 were sent from Sunspear, one is from Prince Doran and the other is from Prince Oberyn. I have read all 4, though only to see if there was urgent information to share with you immediately. There is only a bit of news from King's Landing regarding the war. Lord Stark and Prince Oberyn have written that Lord Tywine has armies in the Riverlands and more marching toward the Crown Lands. Word has also arrived that an army of Northerners under the direction of Robb Stark is on their way south. They have reached Moat Cailin. We knew much of that at night, Song Ashura stated, annoyed that Surin Dondarion had taken it upon herself to read letters which were from Ned. Ned's letters had been hers to read, not Surin's. Ashura reminded herself that Surin was young, only 8 and 10, and merely doing her duty. Indeed, Lady Ashura, I was simply informing you of what I read. Betrothals have also been announced in the letters. King Renly has promised to wed Princess Arianne Martell. A match has also been made to unite House Tyrell to the cause of the crown. Margaery Tyrell and Prince Quentyn Martell are betrothed as well. Both of those marriages are pledged to take place once the immediate threat to King's Landing is settled. Illyria laughed. That is wonderful news. Asher, it seems that some wrongs will finally be set to right. A Martell upon the throne again, should that thought be a happy one. Elia and her children were still dead. Now Elia's niece would be thrust into danger as well. Ashura forced a thin smile to her lips. I am certain that Elia's brothers are pleased with this turn of events. Is there any further news? Surin nodded, sheepish. I do apologize, Lady Ashura, I read all of the letters, as I said, so that I might know if there was any urgent news. Lord Stark wrote to you of plans regarding your sons. Ashura's eyes narrowed. What about her sons? What matter did he write regarding? It seems that he has pledged your sons to wed. He apologizes for the suddenness of the decision. Jon he has pledged to Tyenn Sand, Prince Oberyn's third-born daughter. Arthur he has pledged to Myrcella Hill, formerly Baratheon, Cersei Lannister's daughter. For a few moments Ashura could do nothing but stare blankly at Surin. How could Ned promise her sons to anyone? The children were hers to care for, to protect, what had he done for them? She breathed deep, willing her emotions to stay inside. John wasn't hers to decide his fate, she knew that well enough from the day he had been given to her. Did Ned not tell her, that very same day, that he would find a match for Alysanne when she was of age? Why would he not seek to make matches for the other children as well? She scarcely noticed that Illyria had picked up a letter from the desk until it was pressed to her hand. I believe this is the letter. Ashura seated herself and read the letter slowly, trying to make sense of the words. Ned's words informed her that the match between John and Tyen was Oberyn's initial suggestion. Apparently Prince Oberyn had mentioned the affection John and Tyen had for one another. She knew the true reason. She knew that Oberyn, and likely Doran, wanted to ensure that John was theirs. She wished that Oberyn had never learned the truth about John. She wished that he could have been kept safe instead of becoming a game piece for the Martells to use. John was her son, more than he was ever Lyanna Stark's. She had nursed him with Aelys and Arthur. She had kissed his hurts and rocked him to sleep. He was her son. But he did love Tyen Sand. Even if the Martells had not been plotting since John's infancy to control him, Ashura thought it likely that he would have grown to love one of Prince Oberyn's girls. With the change of kings in King's Landing, the foolish idea of Prince Doran to wed John to Arianne was now nothing but a passing thought of long ago. Arianne being the queen was all that mattered to the Martells, that and the death of Tywin Lannister. She was glad that Arianne would not wed her son. Prince Doran's young daughter was far too spirited and intemperate for her son. Ashura returned her attention to the letter. The decision to betroth Arthur to Myrcella was purely for political reasons. King Renly wanted to ensure that Cersei Lannister's children were controlled, and how better to control them than to wed her children to the children of his greatest allies. As such Tommen, the former prince, would wed one of Prince Oberyn's younger daughters, when the children were of age. Politically, Ashura agreed, yet the thought of her children being treated as pieces in a game was more than she wished to bear. As she read further, she learned that John had not been forced into the betrothal. She nearly laughed, she knew that John adored Oberyn's third daughter. He likely had jumped at the chance to wed Tyen. Apparently Tyen had chosen to agree to the match as well. Perhaps that match was not so bad as her initial gut reaction had been. Truth be told, she knew nothing of Cersei Lannister's daughter other than the fact that the girl was a child. Perhaps Arthur could be happy with the arrangement. Perhaps the former princess could be happy with her son. For now both were too young for the betrothal to mean much at all. She eventually set aside the letter. It seems that Lord Stark believes that my children are useful for making alliances. Though I suppose that is the way of the world. Thank you, Lady Saryn, for telling us this information. She read the remaining 3 letters, trading them with her sister as they read. When they were finished, she asked where her rooms would be located. When Saryn told her the answer, she excused herself. She needed to rest, and to prepare herself for meeting with Ned's daughters. Underscore 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 underscore. Sansa and Arya Stark followed Alysanne and Lucas Sand to the Solar where they would dine with Lady Saryn Dondarrion, Lady Illyria Dondarrion, and Lady Ashura Dayne. She and Arya walked stiffly, with their heads held high. There was no way to hide their anxieties. Nor was there truly a way for them to hide their surprise in meeting their youngest half-brother. They had known about Lucas, of course, they had known about all 4 of their half-siblings. Sansa and Arya had watched the arrival of the Danes from a window which overlooked the courtyard. They had jostled one another to see the woman who their father must have loved, at least Sansa thought that her father must have loved Lady Ashura. Not that her father didn't love her mother. Her parents loved one another very much. She did not understand why he had not been faithful to mother except if he loved another as well. Could someone love more than one person? The knights in stories never loved anyone but their maidens. Arya had claimed that she wasn't interested in seeing or meeting Lady Ashura, but she had squeezed herself beside Sansa so that they could see her when she arrived. They hadn't seen much, as Ashura had spent little time in the courtyard and they were too far away to truly see her. They had then watched while Alysanne assisted with the direction of the horses, carts, and chests while a young boy stood beside her. They tired of watching after a time and returned to the common area of their suite of rooms. It had been while they were nibbling at the remnants of their mid-morning meal when Alysanne had arrived with Lucas. Sansa had gasped when she saw the boy. She noticed Arya's eyes widen at the sight of him as well. She had not often thought of what her half-siblings might look like. Jon and Arthur both resembled father, just as Arya did. Aelys said that she resembled her mother and that Lucas did as well. Yet looking at Lucas it was not Alysanne that Sansa saw, but Bran. There were differences between her full and half-brothers, yet the similarities stole Sansa's breath away. Bran's hair was red and Lucas's was dark brown, but Bran's hair had always been the darkest of the reds. Bran's eyes were blue, as Robb and Rickon and Sansa's were all blue, but his were a deep blue, as deep as the sea. Lucas's eyes were dark purple. Yet their faces were the same shape, their smiles crooked in just the same way. Even in personality and temperament, as Sansa would learn, the boys were very similar. After spending a few hours awkwardly attempting conversation, during which Alysanne and Sansa did more talking than Arya and Lucas combined, they were summoned to their dinner. Sansa could feel the tension radiating from her sister as they entered the room. Sansa felt anxious as well, but she promised herself that she would not glare or be impolite to Lady Ashura. When they entered, they were greeted kindly by Lady Saryn and then introduced to Lady Illyria and Lady Ashura. Ashura was lovely, Sansa noticed at once. She felt angry quite suddenly, though she did not quite know why. Father loved mother and mother was beautiful, more beautiful than this woman from Dorne. She stared at the women even as they were all seated. Her hair was nearly black, though strands of silver streaked her hair. She had remarkable eyes, the same as Alysanne and Lucas, all deep shades of purple and violet. Mother was still prettier than Lady Ashura, Sansa thought fiercely. They all greeted one another politely as they were seated. Shortly after sitting, the first course was laid before them. Sansa averted her eyes from Lady Ashura to the food that was placed before her. The first course was rabbit soup. Sansa watched the carrots and greens float in the soup as she moved her spoon. She stared at it as though her food was the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. They did not speak during the soup. When the fish was laid before them, Lady Illyria broke the silence by attempting conversation, as was her duty as the hostess. Lady Sansa, Lady Arya, how has your stay been here at Blackhaven? It has been very pleasant here, Sansa replied. Lady Saryn has been a wonderful hostess and everyone has been kind. I am glad to hear that. I do believe my good sister shall have much to teach me of how to run this household. It must be difficult for both of you to be away from all that you know. I know that I shall miss Starfall now that Blackhaven is my home. We have been concerned for your family since learning of the Kingslayer's actions against Lord Stark. I am glad that he is faring better as of late, aside from the threat of war. Sansa smiled graciously. Thank you, Lady Illyria. Our journey has been difficult ever since we departed from Winterfell, though we have had time to rest here. We do miss our home, and hope to return when traveling is safer. It was better when we still had our wolves, Arya muttered under her breath. Sansa glared at her sister, but Arya was stabbing her fish with her knife. Illyria gave her a sympathetic smile. I understand. Saryn has had time to tell us much of what has transpired to your family. Life has truly been difficult this year for House Stark. Your family is often in our thoughts. It is my hope that your stay here will be enjoyable, even in the midst of the changes our country is going through. You have our thanks, Lady Illyria and Lady Saryn. Every effort has been made to help us adjust to Blackhaven. Sansa elbowed her sister so that she would respond. With a quick glare at Sansa, Arya turned to Illyria and smiled sweetly. Thank you Lady Illyria and Lady Saryn for your hospitality. You are both quite welcome, Saryn replied. You parents must be proud to have such wonderful daughters. I believe that Lord Stark is proud of all of his children, Ashura stated. Sansa snapped her head in the direction of Ashura Dane. She had made a point of avoiding looking at her since shortly after they had been seated. Yes, Illyria replied thinly. I am certain of that. Sansa did not miss the anger that Illyria directed toward her sister. Was she ashamed of Ashura? Sansa knew that she would be reluctant to admit to having Arya as a sister were she in Lady Illyria's position. Aelys shifted the conversation. Father has allowed Arya to study Bravo Sea water dancing and her instructor has come south with us. She is quite quick at learning to use a sword. Sansa has a lovely singing voice and is being tutored by Septa Yasmin to play the lap harp. Such diverse skills, Illyria replied. I shall see if we can find a lap harp that you may take with you when you depart, so that you may continue learning how to play. A young lady must possess many such talents to be a good hostess. It was several moments before Sansa could manage to speak. A lap harp was not a simple gift. Thank you very much, Lady Dondarrion, for your kindness. It is no great matter to give a gift to one who will find pleasure at receiving it. You are welcome, Lady Sansa. Elated, Sansa continued. How was your journey here? How was your wedding? Illyria seemed saddened and pensive. The journey was long and the wedding was short. Oh. Sansa was taken aback at the reply. I am sorry for that, my lady. Illyria laughed softly. Oh, there is no need to apologize. The wedding was lovely. My maiden's cloak was the one my father wrapped around my mother's shoulders when they wed. The wedding was not what I had anticipated, as we were not intending to wed until next year. I had wished for all of my nephews and my niece to be present when I wed. Necessity, it seems, forced our lives to take a different path. I am proud of my husband and love him dearly, though I wish the circumstances were different. I understand, Sansa replied. It must be difficult to be married to one whom you love, only to lose him so swiftly. She hasn't lost him, Arya proclaimed. Lord Beric will return with Edric, Arthur, and Jon. They have to come back. That is our hope and prayer, Ashura replied quietly. Arya hesitated when she looked at Ashura. Until that moment she had done nothing but glare at the mother of her half-siblings. She softened ever so slightly, for a moment. It's mine as well. Why do people fight wars? Ashura closed her eyes for a moment and lowered her head before looking at all of them again. People fight wars for what they think is right. There are things worth fighting for. Our families are worth fighting for, are worth dying for. In some ways, I think that is what causes every war, people wanting to better their own family above anyone else. Arya chewed on her lip. My direwolf is named Nymeria. I don't have her anymore, but I named her after Queen Nymeria. Nymeria fought for her people to have a home. Father fought the Mad King because he killed my grandfather and uncle, and Prince Rhaegar took Aunt Lyanna. She spoke slowly, considering her words as she spoke. Why is father fighting this war? Ashura's eyes fell to her lap before she looked back up at Arya. Your father believes in fighting for what is right. He has made many difficult decisions in his life. Yet in this matter, I believe that he is making what he believes are the best decisions that he can, given the situation in which he has found himself. He always tries to make the most honorable decisions which are available to him. Always. The word left Sansa's mouth before she could stop herself. She heard the intake of breath from everyone at the table. In most regards, Ashura replied coolly, as she trained her eyes upon Sansa. I find your opinion of my father curious, Lady Ashura. Shaking, she stood and curtsied quickly, unable to stay in the room for another moment. If you will all excuse me. She heard Arya push away her seat and follow her swiftly from the room. She did not care that she was impolite or improper. She did not want to hear Ashura Dane speak of her father or his honor. She could not bear it for another moment. Underscore 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 underscore. It was late in the afternoon, close to evening, when Alysanne and Lucas followed their mother to meet with Sansa and Arya. Aelys thought that the idea was terrible. She thought that they should wait, allow the girls time to grow accustomed to everything, but her mother was insistent. They found her half-sisters in the gardens. Sansa was practicing with the lap harp. The time she had spent practicing was beginning to show progress. Alysanne could hear the melody of a mother's smile as Sansa played. Arya was on the ground near one of the large cedar trees, doing something near the roots. Her dress was covered in dirt and twigs. You are quite talented, Ashura said quietly, drawing attention to herself and interrupting the girls. May I speak with you? Arya glared at Ashura, but said nothing. Sansa turned to her, her expression neutral. This is not my house, Lady Ashura, you may go wherever you are permitted. Ashura smirked and sat across from Sansa. Lucas and Alis seated themselves nearby in the circle of benches. Arya moved closer, though she remained separate, seated upon the grass. You speak truly. This is now my sister's home, and we are all guests here. Even at Starfall, where I was born, I will someday be considered a guest. The same may happen to yourselves when you are of age and your brother is Lord of Winterfell. Our paths in life are rather uncertain as women and for my children, as bastards. I wanted to speak with you about your father. Why? Arya hissed. Is something wrong with father? Sansa asked. No, girls, Ashura soothed. There is no news of your father or of your half-brothers. Both of the girls seemed to relax at her reply. I want to explain to you what transpired between your father and myself long ago. You are both nearly young women, and will soon be of an age where men desire you and you desire them. She turned to Alis and Lucas. I have not explained much of this to either of you, my sweetlings, and I think you all need to understand your father and I more. The girls grumbled, but did not leave. Alysanne and Lucas merely regarded their mother curiously. Though she had often told them many good things of their father's character, she had never explained details of the rebellion or of how she had met their father. She had always said that it hurt her too much to speak of the rebellion. I met your father in King's Landing about half a year before the tournament at Harrenhal, where your Aunt Lyanna was favored by Prince Rhaegar. Your father had come to King's Landing with Lord Jon Arryn and Lord Robert Baratheon. While Lord Arryn was seeking an audience with the king and small council, the young Robert and Ned were allowed to move freely about the castle. She looked upward, remembering. Her tone was hushed and sad. I was a lady-in-waiting to Princess Elia Martell. She and I had known one another since I was quite young. I was nearly 18, and unpromised. My father was never efficient with finding marriages for his children. My mother died birthing Illyria, and she had been a great influence in Aron's first marriage. Aron was my oldest brother, Edric's father. When my mother died, much of my time was spent with her relatives, the Martells. When Elia was wed to Rhaegar, I travelled with her to King's Landing. My brother Arthur was already in the Kingsguard. I spent a great deal of time with Arthur whenever he was not on duty. He looked out for me. He tried to find a good match for me. Ashura paused, dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief. She seldom spoke of her brother Arthur. He died for duty in the war was all she would typically say of her elder brother. With a wry smile, she continued. Prince Oberyn had shown interest in me, though he had also shown the same amount of interest in many other young women. By Harrenhal 4 daughters had been born to him. Elia and Arthur were both opposed to such a match, though Princess Maria I think would have approved. So when Ned and Robert visited, Arthur observed them. Robert was already pledged to your Aunt Lyanna, but Ned was unpromised. Arthur told me that he seemed a good man, so I took it upon myself to meet him. Warmth shone in her expression at the mention of Ned Stark. All 4 children were listening intently to the story. He was sweet, your father. He was calm, quiet, and unaffected. We spoke a few times during his stay in King's Landing, however Robert saw us the one time and embarrassed Ned terribly. They left the next day, and we did not speak again until Harrenhal. The night of the opening feast, Brandon, your uncle, spoke with me. He asked me to dance with Ned. He explained the entire situation which had occurred between Ned, Robert, and myself. I was willing to forgive their foolishness. Arya moved closer, raising a curious brow. What did they do? Ashura laughed. I don't truly recall. It has been so long ago now. When one is young, one tends to say and do many foolish things. So, I walked to where your father was seated and we spoke again. He apologized, I forgave him, and then we danced. We spent much of the tournament together after that day. We fell in love there. But father loves mother. It was Arya who spoke again, quite emphatically. I know that he does, Ashura conceded. But at that time your mother was pledged to wed your uncle Brandon. Ned was unpledged and so was I. Foolishly we were so in love that we promised to wed and thought nothing of the consequences. Alysanne is the result of those decisions at that tournament. Ashura paused and smoothed her skirt slowly. Alice could sense the discomfort in her sisters and brother, and felt disquieted herself. We parted from the tournament awkwardly. I dared not speak to him after Roriga crowned Lionel as Queen of Love and Beauty. I was so angry, so embarrassed for Elia, that speaking with Lionel's brother would have been in poor taste. Later, when my pregnancy became known, I was returned to Starfall. Then Roriga took Lionel and the rebellion began. Your parents wed to fulfill the oath Lord Ricard Stark and Lord Hoster Tully had made regarding your mother and uncle. My house was allied with the Targaryens, the promises Ned and I had unwisely made could not be kept. She paused again, looking down at her hands as they knit together. When your father met me again, our decisions were wrong, and our own selfish choices. I wish that I could tell you a better reason, but I cannot. I do not want any of you to hold my actions, or your father's, against any of your siblings. You are brothers and sisters, that you have different mothers is not any of your faults. The fact that my actions and your father's have hurt your mother is regrettable. I do not ask that you like me. I only ask that you do not blame your brothers and sister for actions that they had no part of. I think that, as you grow older and learn more about love and the hurts that can be caused by our actions, you will understand a little better what happened between your father and I. I would also ask that you do not hold anything against your father. He lost much in that war. We are also all to travel to Sunspear as guests of Prince Doran, Alysanne added quietly. It would make travel easier if we could cooperate. They were all quiet then, considering all that had been said. For a moment, Sansa and Arya both chewed on their lower lips in an incredibly similar manner. You have given me much to think upon, Sansa said, looking at her lap. I apologize for my earlier behavior. I know that I was impolite. Alis noticed her mother's soft smile at Sansa's words. She had not been truly upset at Sansa's outburst at dinner. She had apparently anticipated some rough moments with Lady Stark's daughters. I have taken no offense, Lady Sansa. I do not doubt the difficulty of this situation for you and your sister. Arya was fidgeting, and from where she was seated had managed to pluck large quantities of grass from the turf surrounding her. Eventually she looked up. I don't have to like you. Ashura shook her head. No, Lady Arya, you do not have to like me, though I would ask you to show respect toward me as you would to any other lady or elder. Alysanne noticed the smirk which Sansa needed cover with her hand. Her mother did not yet have an understanding of Arya Stark. Arya replied very slowly. I like Alis, and Arthur, and Jon. I won't dislike Lucas either. He reminds me of Bran. She turned to Lucas with a sly smile. Do you want to practice swordplay with Syrio tomorrow? Lucas returned her grin. Yes, I would like that. Are we at peace then? Ashura asked. Yes, Lady Ashura, Sansa replied. I suppose so, said Arya. That is good enough for me. Ashura breathed deeply and stood, smoothing her skirts as she moved. The hour grows late. We should probably all retire to our rooms. Until the morrow, ladies of House Stark. Lucas, it is time for you to go to your room. Do I have to go if my sisters aren't? He glanced conspiratorially at Arya. Come with me, she said with a grin. I haven't shown you Needle yet. Then we can go to our rooms. She yawned dramatically. Then we need to sleep. Alis looked down so that her smile could be hidden. She noticed that her mother did much the same. Lucas looked up at Ashura. May I? You may, she laughed, placing a kiss on Lucas's forehead. Lucas waited a moment until Arya stood. Catch me, she shouted before running off with a laugh, her skirt pulled up to her knees so that she could run faster. He sprinted behind her, laughing. Sansa stood with a sigh, shaking her head at her sister. Until the morrow, Lady Ashura, Alis. Until the morrow, sister. Sansa curtsied slightly and walked away at a much steadier pace than her little sister. Alysanne stood when her sister disappeared into the castle. I am glad that you are here. Ashura embraced her daughter. I am glad to be here with you, my sweet girl. You do not know how much my heart ached when you parted from me. How much being parted from your brothers hurts me. Alis slipped her arm in her mother's and they walked toward the castle. They will return to us. Her mother remained silent for a long time, though she pressed her free hand to her eyes as they walked. Too often have I seen men whom I love go to war and not return. Jon and Arthur aren't even men, they are just boys. I never even said farewell to Jon. Alis laid her head on her mother's shoulder as they walked. You still have me and Lucas. Ashura kissed her daughter's head. For that I am very glad. I do not like to think of any of you in harm's way. My brothers will not die. I had that faith in my own brothers, in my father. Alysanne bit her tongue. Her heart ached for her mother, but she could not lose faith that her brothers would return. Her mother's story resonated with her still. She pondered over the bits of her mother's past that were still hidden. What happened to Uncle Arthur? What? Her mother turned to her, startled. You have never talked to us about how he died. With the story of how you and father met. I was just thinking more about him. You never talk about him. You never talk about the rebellion. Arthur died doing his duty. They arrived at, and entered, her rooms. Please leave it there, sweeterling. As you wish, she conceded unwillingly. What was the news that Lady Saryn needed to speak with you and Ally about? Letters arrived from your father and the Prince of Dawn. She seated herself upon the settee. Your half-brother Robb marches to war from the north. There was also a report that Princess Arianne is to wed King Renly and that Lady Margaery Tyrell is to wed Prince Quentyn. Word arrived of the latter a week or so past, but not the former. Shall all of my brothers fight in this war of succession? Alis sat beside her mother, despairing. I'm afraid. Oh sweeterling. She ran her fingers through Alysanne's hair, removing pins and the lace which held her long braid together. Fear is natural. I am afraid for all of you, and have been since your births. I fear for Edric, for Lord Beric, and for your father. I worry about the fate of our country. I worry for our friends, kin, and overlords, the Martells. I worry for the marriages your brothers have been promised into. Startled, Alysanne turned to face her mother. My brothers are promised to wed. Yes, my precious one, Jon and Arthur are betrothed. When did that happen? Your father wrote of the decisions from King's Landing. Alysanne stared blankly. When she spoke, her voice shook. Wrote of the decisions. Did he not ask you? You raised us, not him. It is his duty to find matches for you and your siblings. He promised that the day he saw you. But you wish to wed for love. I know that. Such was my desire once, but duty changes our path in life more often than desire. But it wasn't duty that bound you to father. It was me and Jon and Arthur and then Lucas. Why return to him so often if he chose Lady Catelyn over you? He must have known of me when you were with child with Jon. He then married Lady Catelyn for an alliance. Where was his duty to us? Her mother looked down. Things were far more complicated than you make it seem. Alysanne stood, agitated. How so? He chose an alliance over you when he must have known that he had a child with you and had gotten you with child again. How does he have the right to later choose our marriages? She was still looking at her lap, twisting her hands together. Her voice was tense but calm. He is your father, which is what gives him the right to decide. Jon will be pleased with his match, I think. He is to wed Tyenn Sand. Arthur will wed the bastardized former Princess Myrcella Hill when she is of age. And of me. It seemed the sensible to ask. Looking up, she replied. A match for you has yet to be decided. In time one will be decided for you as well. She bit back an angry laugh. With or without your consent. I am certain we shall discuss the matter. You didn't with Jon and Arthur's matches. Theirs are matters of political expedience. How are either politically expedient? The former queen's daughter is only a little girl. Jon is of Dawn, so is Ty. That match does nothing politically. It would be more sensible for Sansa or Arya to be pledged to Highgarden or Sunspear. Alis was pacing, and practically spitting the words at her mother. Your half-sisters are not of age to marry either. Your father may very well have such a plan in place. I am not privy to his thoughts regarding the futures of his children with Lady Catelyn. Nor would it seem that you are privy to his thoughts regarding your own children. Alysanne spat. I thought that you liked him, Ashura replied calmly, though she seemed weary. Liking him and having faith in his making a match for me aren't the same. I don't understand why you approve of these matches when he has given no regard to you in this matter. She sighed heavily. I have told you that it was his responsibility, Alice. It was his responsibility to choose you over Lady Caitlin the moment he knew of me, and he didn't. Stop speaking of matters that you don't understand. Ashura snapped. Alysanne stopped moving, startled. What don't I understand, mother? I understand only what I have heard and seen. Until today you had never spoken of how you met father. You still do not speak of Robert's rebellion in the slightest. She shook her head, confused. How you can speak well of my father when he must have chosen Lady Caitlin over you? I do not see how he could have fathered myself and my brothers if he didn't know. You never speak of Uncle Arthur either, and there are some at Starfall who claim that father killed him. Her mother sat straight, staring at her daughter in fright, even as tears began to form in her eyes. It's true, isn't it? Something in her mother's eyes told her that it was true. She broke. Tears began to prick at her eyes. Tell me, if that rumor is true, how could you allow him to touch you again? How could you raise us to love him if he did kill your brother? Ashura closed her eyes, tears slipped down her cheeks. I cannot tell you. Cannot tell me what? She cried. By all the gods, mother, what is so hard for you to say? John, she whispered, burying her face in her hands. Shaking with emotion, Alice did not understand. What about him? Her mother eventually looked up, exhaustion and tears lining her face. He is the duty for which Arthur died. What? Her mother spoke tonelessly. You are forgetting one person who died in the war, you aunt. Aunt. Alysanne's first thoughts went to her Aunt Illyria. Unspeaking, Ashura gazed at her daughter steadily, waiting. What aunt was her mother referring to? How could an aunt have been the duty for which her Uncle Arthur died? Then she remembered her other aunt, the one who died in the war. The aunt who was not spoken of, especially in Dawn. She felt faint and stood against the wall for support. No, Mama, please, no. Her mother's voice was so hollow that it shook Alysanne to the core. Lord Stark did not know about you until he arrived at Starfall with an infant and Dawn. He killed my brother Arthur to protect himself. Arthur died doing his duty to Rhaegar by protecting the heir to the throne. I took in the boy for his protection and to honor my brother. Your father is blameless in everything of which you accuse him. Blameless? I don't understand. There are some things that you may never understand. There are things I will never be able to explain to you. Shaking her head, she whispered. I should never have told you this. John is not my brother. She needed to say the words. She needed to hear something different, anything to take back her mother's words. John was her brother, she needed to hear her mother say the words. My sweet Alysanne. She stood and moved to Alysanne's side, taking hold of her hands. He is your cousin, born to be a prince, and named king upon the death of his brother Aegon and the other members of his house. Do you understand the weight of this secret and why John must wed one of Oberyn's daughters? Alice could do nothing but shake as tears slipped from her eyes. Nothing made sense. Everything made sense. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. Yes, she choked out eventually. May I leave, mother? I need to think. I need to be alone. Her mother grasped her hands tightly, fear straining her voice. You can never tell a soul what I have told you. We will all die if the wrong person knows. Do you understand? Yes, she squeaked, terrified. Do you swear to never tell a soul? She shook in reply, unable to speak. Her mother seemed satisfied, for she eventually relaxed and released Alysanne. I am sorry, my sweet girl. She gently cupped Alysanne's cheek. I am sorry for everything. The air hung hot and heavy in King's Landing the day John Sand arrived. Other than the teasing of Oberyn and Nymeria, the journey had been easy. He was excited to return to the city. He was proud to stand with Dawn in the fight. He was ready to wed when the battles were ended. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply of the salt air. He could still feel the gentle touch of Tyenn on his skin, her taste on his lips, and smell the scent of her which still clung faintly to his clothes. He missed her already. He still could not quite believe that she had decided to accept the proposal. Dreaming of my sweet sister might get you killed in battle, Nymeria said with a laugh, disturbing his thoughts as she appeared at his side. We aren't in battle, he rebuffed. They stood midship, at the railing, waiting to disembark. There was no room for another tall ship in the ports, so they had to wait for a smaller boat to ferry them to the docks. Not yet, but soon we shall be. Love is a distraction on the field of battle, Oberyn said as she appeared at his other side. He glanced between them, trying to not appear to be disturbed. The daughters of Prince Oberyn, though they were called sand snakes, were more wolf than snake to Jon. Alone they were just girls, together they were a pack, circling their prey. Would he feel more or less surrounded by them when he married Tywin? Love may be motive to fight for as well, dear sister. We fight the Lannisters to avenge our aunt and cousins. We fight to place our sweet cousin upon the throne. What greater love is there than the love of family? What higher honor is there than to fight for our family? Oberyn snorted, but did not reply. Jon moved his head in agreement, but Oberyn frightened him too much for him to speak against her. Seeing that Jon and Oberyn would not engage the conversation further, Nymeria stepped away with a sigh and informed them that she was returning to her cabin. Oberyn walked away a few minutes later, leaving Jon to stare at King's Landing across the waters of the bay. It was 2 more hours before they were able to board a smaller sailboat that would transport them from Maiden's Blush to the docks. The swarms of boats in the bay made the waters rough and somewhat treacherous. Smaller boats collided with larger boats, sometimes causing one or both to capsize. Then the upturned people would need to be rescued, many were irate. When they made it to land, Jon and his shipmates were greeted by guards who sorted the various arrivals. Merchants were sent to one pier, commoners entering the city were sent a different way. Soldiers were sent various directions depending upon their sworn house. Arrivals of noble birth were sent on a different route altogether. Jon, Oberyn, and Nymeria announced themselves as the children of Lord Eddard Stark and Prince Oberyn Martell, respectively. They were sent with other Dornish nobles, and lesser nobles of the Vale, toward the Red Keep. When they finally were escorted into the courtyards of the castle, they were again forced to wait in lines. Jon was tempted to slip away from the crowds and make his way to the Tower of the Hand. Yet he thought it better to wait, so he did. Beside him, the sisters waited as well. Nym found a man from Lemonwood to smile at and charm in order to pass the time. Oberyn ground her heels into the hard-packed earth and shifted constantly as they waited, impatient and ready to fight as ever. Jon simply looked around. The castle was different than when he had left. While only a few short months had passed, many things had changed, for himself and for Westeros. Kings, battles, and betrothal pacts to change the shape of the kingdoms. For the Red Keep, the first changes were in the banners which waved from the heights of the towers. Only stags hung where once the entwined sigil of stag and lion proudly waved. On the lower battlements hung the banners of the lords whose fealty was now sworn to Renly Baratheon. Stark, Martell, and Tyrell were the 3 largest banners and the 3 largest houses who had sworn themselves to the new king. Below the 3 great houses were the lesser houses. Houses of Dorne, the Reach, the Crown Lands, and the Storm Lands, as well as some from the Riverlands, Vale, and North. There were fewer banners from the latter 3 regions, but that was not unexpected. The Riverlands were fending off the Lannisters. The Vale was not yet in support of the new king. The North was furthest from the Crown Lands and would likely not arrive for some time. With Lord Stark present in King's Landing, the North would follow. Eventually their escort arrived, consisting of Alan, from Lord Stark's household, and Demon Sand. Jon Allen greeted. Your father was informed of your return and has asked that you be taken to the Hand's Tower. Jon turned to Alan, and greeted him with a welcoming smile. It is good to see you again, Alan. May I introduce you to Oberyn and Nymeria? Sand Demon interrupted, the eldest daughters of Prince Oberyn Martell. It seems the 3 of you have arrived well. Of course we have, Demon Nym purred, abandoning the young man who was hopelessly enraptured by her. Demon grinned. I'm surprised that Prince Doran permitted the 2 of you to come here. It's more surprising that you are permitted here, Oberyn grunted. I am ever in your father's service, Demon replied with a mocking bow. Seeing that Oberyn's hands were twitching by her swords, Jon interrupted. Why don't we go to the Tower of the Hand? Smirking, Alan bowed respectfully. It would be my pleasure. If you will all follow me. Obera held Demon's gaze steadily for a few moments, looking as though she was ready to smack the pretty smile from his face. Yet she eventually relaxed and assented to traveling to the tower. When they arrived at the tower, they were greeted by Stark and Martell men, who gladly welcomed the new arrivals. Jon was shown to the rooms he had occupied with Arthur, while Obera and Nymeria were shown to rooms which had been unoccupied during Jon's last visit. The steward told them that their fathers were in a meeting with the king but would dine with them that evening. Alone at last, Jon could not help but feel lonely. Traveling to King's Landing the first time had been an adventure with his brother. They had not been in the city for long when they had been found by Lord Beric and Edric. At that time, they had been with their father and half-sisters and later Aelys and Oberyn. In their escape south, he had known most everyone he had traveled with. Even on his trip to Sunspear, he had known several of his companions. Yet after Sunspear he was with people whom he barely knew. Of all the Sand Snakes, Jon had spent the most time with Tyon, Elia, and Sarala. He knew Nym and Obera only in passing. He missed his brothers, his cousin, his sister, and even his half-sisters. He missed his mother and aunts. He missed Starfall, his home. He wondered if Arthur and Edric were safe. Had they already met with the opposing forces? Would they survive if and when that meeting took place? Seeing no other option than to await the arrival of the rest of his belongings whenever the ship made it to the docks, or for the arrival of his father or Oberyn, Jon decided to rest. Hours later, near evening, Jon dined alone with his father. Their table was laid with honeyed duck, caramelized vegetables, and fresh bread to eat. There was also wine, ale, and water to drink. All of which were welcomed after eating on a ship for so many days. Jon was surprised that Prince Oberyn did not join them, but the prince was apparently dining privately with his daughters. "How was your journey?" Lord Stark asked, shortly after they began eating. The thought of it was overwhelming. He had been so many places since leaving Starfall that the months seemed a blur. "It seems as though I have barely stopped traveling since we departed from here. The weather has mostly been fair, though there was a brief storm as we sailed into the bay. The heat was intense as we traveled to Blackhaven. Overall, I would say that my travels have gone well." "Good," he replied warmly. "That is good to hear. I am glad that you have safely returned. How were Sansa and Arya when you last saw them?" "They were well. Arya tried to run back initially, but she seemed content when I left Blackhaven. She and Edric ran through the whole castle on the day we arrived." He was showing her all of the galleries and the view of the mountains. Sansa seemed glad to rest. He hesitated, remembering how disheartening being sent away had been. We were all upset that we did not have the chance to say farewell to you when we left." His reply was sober and apologetic. "I am sorry for sending all of you away without any word of warning. If events had proceeded differently I would have sent all of you to Dorne in a less stressful manner. Given all that occurred after your departures, I am glad that you were in a safer place. Since the coup, the city has been uneasy. A minor attempt was made to restore the throne to the Lannisters, though it was averted. 3 men of the King's Guard were executed as a result. When word arrived of King Renly's ascension to the throne, I believe that it became more apparent to us that you were acting in our best interests. I am grateful that we were sent for our safety. It was better to be sent away to be safe than to be sent away for being unwanted." Lord Stark agreed, and they ate quietly again. A short while later, he spoke again. "Was Jane Poole well?" "Veon, her father, has been concerned about her. She was doing well when I last saw her. She scarcely left Sansa's side, though she did speak with Aelys as we traveled. Veon will be pleased to hear of her well-being." Jon agreed with his father. He knew it was painful for parents to be parted from their children. He felt a pang of guilt that he had not said anything to his own mother when he had run to King's Landing so many months past. He missed her. "Perhaps they will be reunited soon," he offered. Lord Stark's smile seemed both wistful and melancholy. "When the threat of the Lannisters is ended, we shall all be reunited with our loved ones." Jon illumined at his father's words. His thoughts turned from his family to his betrothed. He longed to be reunited with her. "I hope that the threat shall be at an end shortly. My mother likely misses me quite dreadfully." I am also anxiously anticipating the day I may wed my betrothed. I was truly shocked by the proposed betrothal when it was told to me. When Prince Oberyn spoke of your affection for his daughter, the match seemed a good way to unite our cause. Formerly Lord Stark told him quietly, I trust that you are both satisfied with the arrangement. I am very happy, father. A broad grin spread across his face at the memory of Tywin accepting the match. I was surprised that she assented, but very pleased that she did. His father seemed pleased by his response. I am glad. It is not often that marriages find joy or happiness when they are arranged. I hope that all of my children will find happiness in their marriages. Something in his father's tone intimated that there were more matches that had been planned. Have any more been arranged? A motion of Lord Stark's head confirmed the suspicion before he spoke. Arthur should be wed to Cersei Lannister's daughter, when Myrcella is of age. One of Prince Oberyn's younger girls will wed the former Prince Tommen when they are of age. As for the rest of your brothers and sisters, that has not been decided. Sansa's betrothal to Joffrey Hill has been invalidated as he is not whom he was represented to be. It is my belief that any more marriage arrangements can wait. Does my mother know? He swore that his father flinched. She has been informed. These arrangements for myself and Arthur didn't involve her at all. She raised us, not you. Jon stood. Angry, he raised his voice. I scarcely think it right for her to have no say in whom her children should wed. Lord Stark's face was sombre and stony, but his tone remained even. It was decided the day I learned of Alysanne's birth that I would choose whom all of you would wed. She has known that from the time of your infancy. That was news to him. He quieted somewhat, trying to be mature. Why didn't she say as much to us? We didn't want to think upon it. He sighed deeply. When your mother and I write one another, it has always been easier to avoid matters such as your futures. Before you and your brother arrived in King's Landing for the tournament, I could still only imagine you as I had last seen you, standing beside Alysanne, Arthur, and your mother by the docks of Starfall. Unfortunately, you are no longer children. I have missed far too much of your lives. Yet even with having missed much of your life, I must do my duty, and so must you. I am glad that your impending marriage should find happiness. Jon swallowed hard and sat again, clenching his fists. How did this man have the right to decide their futures? And yet, he was happy with the woman he was to wed. Would his brothers and sisters be happy as well? A few moments later, they resumed eating quietly, though both picked at their food. King Renly would like to speak with you in the morning, Lord Stark said, some time later. Jon looked up, shocked. With me? Yes. He said that he found your skills in the tournament grounds admirable. He also said that you spoke with one another before your departure. We did. I spoke with His Grace and Sir Loras Tyrell at the tourney and a few other times during my stay here. I was going to ask, before the coup, if I could request to squire under him. Lord Stark bowed his head thoughtfully. Perhaps you may have that honor. In the morning we shall see what it is that he desires. Underscore 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 underscore. When morning came, Jon was brought to the king before he had broken his fast. Upon arriving at King Renly's Solar, he saw that a meal had been laid out for both of them. Upon the table were breads, puddings, blood sausages, a pot of fish stew, boiled goose eggs, cheese, and a wide variety of fruit from Dorne and the Reach. The smell of it was wonderful and made Jon's stomach growl. Your Grace, Jon said with a bow when he was escorted into the room. The young king smiled. His smile did not seem as carefree as when they had spoken before the coup. Good morning, Jon. Come, sit, eat and drink. How was your journey? Jon favored him with a slow smile. Long, Your Grace. I have hardly rested since I departed from here with my brother and sisters. He walked to the table and seated himself. I imagine that you have been quite busy yourself. I am quite sorry for the loss of your brother, King Robert. He acknowledged the sentiment with a gracious bow of his head, yet his mood seemed rather morose. I thank you for the sentiment. My brother was a man of great passions, though he never learned that some passions should remain separate or moderate. A year ago I had 2 brothers and now I have none. None, your grace. John knew that King Renly was the youngest of 3 brothers. Had something happened to Lord Stannis Baratheon? The king laughed, a hollow tone. Oh, Stannis lives, for now, though it is unlikely that we shall be at peace ever again. He sends a letter a week denouncing me as traitor and usurper. I should have someone go to his island, take his head, and remove my niece to my custody. I could marry her to your father's heir and bring any attempt at descent to an end. The Tyrells wish to wed her to their heir. As if I am so foolish to think they would not try to use her for their favor should I fail to produce an heir. Your grace. Jon stared at the king, feeling very much like he should not be told these matters. You wonder why I say these things to you. He hesitated and then he smiled quite wryly. Quite simply, I have seen your skills with a sword and bow. You are quite a capable fighter. As you grow, you will only increase in skill. You are also the son of Lord Stark, one of the men who seated me upon the throne. You will be wed to a daughter of Prince Oberyn, whose help in installing me was pivotal. In light of that knowledge, I have a request to make of you. A request? Did kings make requests? Whatever you wish, your grace. Was there any other answer to give? I would have you serve as part of my personal guard. I will have Kingsguard as well, though my number is currently 3. When my brother died he had 7 men of the guard, all that are left to me are Sir Barristan. He gestured to the elderly knight who stood behind him. Sir Preston he motioned to the knight at the door. And Sir Aris who is resting at present. Sirs Mandon, Boros, and Meryn were all executed. They made an attempt to free my prisoners and kill myself within 2 months of my ascension. Sir Preston and Sir Aris defended me. They were assisted by men who are loyal to myself. Jon was not certain how to process everything that he had just been told. He was shocked, elated, anxious, and pensive. I can only begin to see the difficulties that your new position brings. My father made mention of their executions. It is good that you are unharmed. May I ask, how is it that you have such faith in me? Renly's expression was mild. If I cannot trust the son of a man who placed me upon the throne, who can I trust? Jon smiled slowly. I see your point, your grace. Then do you accept? Jon pushed his seat away and knelt on the floor. Yes, I should be honored to serve you as part of your personal guard. Renly let out a genuine laugh and motioned for Jon to stand again. Good. Eat then, and I shall tell you more about your duties. They spent the next hour eating and discussing the matters which would be Jon's responsibilities while he served the king. When they were nearly finished, Lord Stark and Prince Oberyn were summoned to be told the news. Both seemed surprised, but pleased to hear of Jon's new position. Underscore 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 underscore. Several weeks later, Jon stood beside King Renly and the small council as they stood upon the walls of the city. They watched as an envoy of 30 men, clad in armor and waving lion banners, was riding toward the gates. The men were allowed inside the city, though they were flanked on all sides by Baratheon men. The king met the envoy in the throne room. He was seated upon the Iron Throne, high above everyone. He wore green, trimmed with gold, and bore a golden circlet upon his head. Standing at the base of the throne were the men of Renly's guard. Jon stood with the guard. In total, the guard consisted of the 3 Kingsguard, as well as 12 men and 1 woman of varying ages, most of whom hailed from the Stormlands. Each member of the personal guard was garbed in a different color, save the white-clad members of the Kingsguard. Jon wore dark purple trimmed with silver. To him it was as though he wore the colors of his houses even in service to the king. Below them stood the men of the small council. Lord Stark stood as hand. Sir Garland Tyrell and Prince Oberyn Martell stood as advisors. Lord Baelish stood as Master of Coin. Lord Varys stood as Master of Whisperers. There was no Grand Maester in the group as Maester Pycelle was still held as a prisoner. To Jon's relief, his father could now stand without a cast, though he was using a cane for added support. The Lannister men were still loosely flanked by guards as they were led into the throne room. One of the men stepped forward from the group. He was a man in his late 20s, tall, with a mane of thick gold hair, a Lannister. He did not seem intimidated in the slightest, though he was surrounded by enemies. When all were standing still and silent, the king spoke. "Has Lord Tywine sent you to restore peace to my kingdom, Sir Davin?" Jon did not miss the mocking humor in Renly's voice. Sir Davin Lannister scowled. "My lord has sent me to demand the release of his family which have been imprisoned within this city. He names you usurper. He demands that his grandson be placed upon the throne, which is his birthright." When Sir Davin finished, there was silence for a time, then the king burst into a fit of laughter. From where he stood, Jon could see Prince Oberyn's deadly grin. The rest of the councillors and guards remained stoic. When Renly stopped laughing, he spoke. His tone was icy and humorless. "You can tell Lord Lannister that he is in no position to make demands. His grandchildren are bastards born of incest. Lady Cersei herself has confessed it to save her head and those of her children. Tywine Lannister has no claim to the throne. I have behind me the power of the southern and northern kingdoms. Lord Tywine stands alone. Tell your lord to bend the knee or he will see the heads of his daughter and his kin line the walls of the Red Keep shortly before his own head joins them." Sir Davin's hands clenched into tight fists. "I shall tell my lord what you have said on the condition that I see the prisoners before departing." There was a pause again as Sir Davin gazed up at the throne, awaiting an answer in silence. With a word from the throne, 2 of the guards opened one of the side doors. A few minutes later 3 people entered the room. 2 were teenage boys while the third was a young girl. All 3 possessed the same gold hair as Sir Davin. "Here are 3 of my prisoners," Sir Davin Renly said. "Lancel and Tyok, sons of Sir Kevan, nephews to Lord Tywine, and former squires to my brother King Robert. I also present you with Myrcella, Lady Cersei's daughter. Step closer to them, speak with them if you will. They have been unharmed and well treated. They can report on the conditions of their fellow prisoners. These and more will die if Lord Tywine does not cease his warring." Jon curled his hands into fists, willing himself not to feel sickened. Myrcella was only a young girl, her cousins standing beside her were near to Jon in age. To think that they could be executed. He stilled himself so that he did not shudder at the thought. Would King Renly still execute Myrcella if Lord Tywine did not kneel, even though she was pledged to marry Arthur when they came of age? The king permitted Sir Davin to speak with his kin for several minutes before interrupting their reunion. "Are you satisfied, Sir Davin, with their condition?" He inclined his head slightly in agreement. "I am." "Then go," Renly commanded. "Return to your lord. Tell him what you have heard and seen." Sir Davin agreed, and a few moments later he and his retinue exited the throne room while the prisoners were led back through the door where they had entered. King Renly then dismissed the guards who were in the outer court, keeping his personal guard and the small council with him. The men of the council turned to face the king. Lord Stark seemed troubled. Prince Oberyn seemed to be bored while also appearing eager for whatever would come next. Sir Garland Tyrell, Lord Baelish, and Varys all bore neutral expressions. "Well, my lords, what shall we make of this? It seems that Tywine Lannister wishes us to believe that he will back down for nothing," Lord Baelish replied. "A foolish position," said Varys, "even from him. He will not have the strength to siege King's Landing." "We do not yet have the strength to hold King's Landing either, my lords, your grace," Sir Garland said. "My father's forces as well as half of the Dornish army are still making their way north. There has been no word from my men since they departed from Moat Cailin," Lord Stark offered. "Neither has Lord Hoster or Lord Edmure sent a raven on the status of Riverrun. I need answers as to what we shall do next, not mutterings that we may fail. What do you say, Prince Oberyn? You always have an opinion on matters." The Viper's grin was dangerous. "We should ride out to meet them, your grace." "Ride out?" Jon could hear anxious anticipation in the king's voice, though he could not see what the king's expression was, for his back was to the throne. "It would be safer to remain within the city," Varys cautioned. "But if we ride out, we can halve the distance between our army and the rest of the forces from the Reach and Dawn," said Garland. "We could surround Lord Tywine. My father's army at last report was only a little over 2 weeks away. The scouts that first spied Lord Tywine's men noted that the army was then camped between God's Eye Lake and Stony September. A courier should be able to reach the southern army and have them join us. One portion coming from the south and the other from the east. The Lannister army should be traveling southeast toward King's Landing. There are, however, many miles and many unknowns in leaving the city, Your Grace, Baelish warned. Renly's laugh was scarcely contained. To hear the day when you and Varys caution the same thing is quite an occasion, my lords. Yet I find myself agreeing with Sir Gulan. While we may be safer within these walls, I will not start my reign cowering in a castle. A king must prove his strength in battle. We will wait to depart until Lord Tywin's envoy is at least 2 days departed from the city. Then we will with haste ready ourselves and depart. Lord Stark looked to the king, pensive. Your Grace, it may be wiser for you to remain here while your armies head out to meet Lord Tywin. If harm should befall you, the succession may be quite messy and dangerous for all who have supported you. Messy, yes, but my riding out is necessary, Lord Stark, surely you see that. I do, Your Grace. Acquiescing, he bowed his head. What should be done if the worst should befall you on the field of battle? His reply was careless laughter. Crown my brother if I should die, though that would be unwise. Or crown yourself, my lord, if you so desire. Were it not for your leg, you too would ride into battle, everyone knows that much. Instead, you shall hold the city as my hand. He bowed again, and the other councillors with him. As your Grace commands. Underscore 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 underscore. Rain was falling in heavy swaths 2 days after the king's armies departed from King's Landing. They tried to press on swiftly, but too many wagons stuck in the mud or broke wheels and axles that continuing in the rain was drastically slowed. The king tried to remain positive, yet even he grew grim in the grey days of marching westward. Yet even with the rain slowing their movements, the hope remained that they would surprise the Lannister armies. Any outriders that had been seen had been killed on sight. The king's spies meanwhile had been able to report movements ahead with ease. If the timing worked as was hoped, the remaining portion of the southern army would approach from the southwest while the king's army would approach from the east, giving very little chance for escape. The rain slowed and tapered to a stop by midday on the 4th day. Their pace quickened and they were able to dry out their clothes and supplies. A week into their march, bodies were seen floating in the black water. The king ordered that the bodies be pulled ashore to prevent the waters of King's Landing from being poisoned. The bodies, all commoners, were then buried in stone cairns that some of the men built. The casual murder of men and women infuriated Jon. He awaited the upcoming battle eagerly, desiring that they might kill all who had harmed the innocent. Days later, messengers between the two parts of King Renly's forces met. The divisions of the army organized further, dividing up where each lord would be positioned upon the field as they approached the Lannister armies. They were to the south of Stony September when lion banners appeared on the horizon. The armies who swore allegiance to the king formed 3 separate units. They were arrayed in a half-circle from the Blackwater Rush to where the Silver Hills bordered the Gold Road. Those under the command of Lord Mace Tyrell were positioned to the furthest west. The forces of Dorne, both those who had come north with the Tyrell army and those who had come from King's Landing, held the center of the army under the command of Prince Oberyn Martell. The remaining forces from the Stormlands as well as other retainers were under the command of King Renly Baratheon, were positioned to the furthest east. They slowly advanced until the circle they formed grew tighter around the Lannister forces. They pushed the Lannisters northward until they were surrounded. The Silver Hills were filled with men who were sworn to the king. The only route of escape left to the Lannisters the day before the battle would begin was through the opposing forces or north across the rapids of the headwaters of the Blackwater. Jon was with the king and the rest of the king's personal guard near the Blackwater Rush. He had parted with Prince Oberyn, Nymeria, and Oberyn several days prior when Oberyn and the Dornish force from King's Landing joined the Dornish forces from the south. They would ride forth in the morning to face the Lannister army. In the waning hours of twilight, along a distant hill crest, Jon could see the banners of Dondarrion and Dane. He thought of his brother and cousin who were surely encamped beneath those banners. He prayed that they might see one another again when the battles were ended. He thought of his father. His parting words had meant much to Jon. "I am proud of you, Jon Lord Stark had said. "Fight well, my son." Jon hoped to see him again. His thoughts then turned to his mother. He assumed that the last thing she had told him was sleep well, wolf pup. She often said that to him before it was time to sleep. He had never said farewell to her. He had not given her a hug or kiss before he had run to King's Landing. He had also never said farewell to Lucas. They would be devastated if he or Arthur were killed in battle. The last tendrils of light faded into the evening dark. Jon went to his bedroll an hour or so later. He was not on the night watch. That duty fell to a very tall and not particularly attractive young woman named Brienne of Tarth and Sir Barristan Selmy. He knew that he would not sleep well, but he did his best to try, tossing and turning before he drifted asleep, awaiting the dawn. Underscore 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 underscore. The sky had barely lightened when Arthur Sand was awakened. There would be no trumpets to announce the start of the attack, just orders whispered in the dark from commanders to their men and occasionally women. Arthur had shared a tent with Edric and Lord Dondarrion. They were among the first to be roused in the morning. Bread and stew were brought to them as they dressed. "Eat enough to keep up your strength," Lord Beric told them. "But do not eat so much that you will soil yourselves." "Why would we do that?" Arthur asked between mouthfuls of bread and stew. Beric wore a grim expression. "Have you seen a man's head parted from his body?" Both boys nodded slowly. They had both witnessed executions of criminals. "A battle is not as clean as that. I am too young to have fought in the wars, but I remember the bandit raiders in the Red Mountains which claimed the lives of my father and mother. By the day's end, should the gods give us success, you will see hundreds of bodies strewn across the fields. Those who die early in the day will be trampled on by horses and bloated by the sun. Some may be split in two, others will be missing heads or hands. You may even see people you know well die upon the field. The more you eat, the more likely you are to vomit it back up by the day's end." Arthur and Edric looked to one another, fear in their eyes. It was hard to take any more food after that, but they did, not knowing when they would get the chance to eat again. When they were finished breaking their fasts, they donned their armor. Beric and Edric also readied their weapons. Then they stepped out of the tent. "Arthur, you will be joining the archers under the command of Lord Dagos Manwadi," Beric informed him. "So far back. That didn't seem fair at all. But Edric is going with you into the battle." His jaw tightened. "Edric is my squire and Lord of Starfall. He will learn beside me as we fight. You are an archer. Did I not see you win the contest in King's Landing? You will remain with the archers, where your skills will be best used." Arthur hung his head, suddenly feeling like a foolish child. "I'm sorry, my lord. Your decision is wise. Ready yourself then. We will meet again when the battle ends." "Yes, my lord." He felt so incredibly young, so unprepared. "Fight well." Lord Beric clasped his shoulder briefly and gave him a comforting smile. "The gods go with you, Arthur." He turned away and walked to his mount. Edric stared at Arthur, uneasy. Arthur embraced his cousin, and held tight for a long moment. What could he possibly say? He did not want to think of his cousin dying. With nothing else to say, he said what they always did when parting. "See you when you return, Ned." He cracked a genuine smile and then laughed. "Try not to miss me too much, Arthur." He then turned and followed their uncle. Among those walking in the same direction as Edric and Beric, Arthur spied Sir Gerald Dane, called Darkstar. He was a distant cousin to the main branch of House Dane. His reputation of pride and cruelty preceded him. He was not welcomed at Starfall as Lady Marissa had thought that he might harm Edric. Arthur's mother and Aunt Illyria also seemed wary of the Lord of High Hermitage, concerned that he would attempt to claim Starfall. Arthur hoped that Lord Beric would keep Edric far from Gerald on the battlefield, just in case the fears of his aunts and mother were justified. Arthur turned back to the tent. Arthur was in his armor, hardened leather with a metal breastplate. Heavier armor would prevent the range of motion he would need as an archer. Even his half-helm was mainly leather, though it was also bound with iron. He slipped his daggers into their sleeves and checked their fastenings before girding his sword. He wished that he could wield Dawn into battle as his namesake had done. His mother had forbidden any of them from wielding Dawn until they were older. In fact, it was one of the few things his mother and aunts agreed upon. Not until he and Jon and Edric and possibly Lucas were of age would any of them be chosen to be the new Sword of the Morning. Arthur thought it likely that Jon would be the new bearer of Dawn, but there was always a chance that it could be himself. So the sword he wore was steel instead of Valyrian steel, well wrought and well balanced. After his sword was secured, he strapped on his quiver of arrows and his bow. In truth, he did not mind being with the archers, however, he also wanted his chance to prove himself with a sword. His mother would be glad of his relative safety with the archers instead of the riders. He had feared that she would prevent his departure with Lord Beric when they had parted at Blackhaven. Yet she had parted from him without fuss or ceremony. She had given him a hug and a kiss and wished him well. He hoped that she would not be distraught with all but Alis and Lucas parted from her. She knew that he and Jon and Edric were all old enough to go to war. He left the tent and went to the horse masters. He was given his mount, a fine red stallion named Apple who had been his for 6 years. They had grown together at Starfall and he took his mount regularly on hunts. He fell in line with the other archers. They would take their positions along a ridge in the Silver Hills. When they rode to the ridge, Arthur was able to see the various forces which were assembled for war. The Lannisters were easily outnumbered. His mount shied under him. His shaking hand stroked Apple's mane. "Peace," he murmured to his horse. "This is no different than a hunt." His words sounded good in theory, but felt very wrong. He and Apple had hunted together since they were old enough to hunt. He had given Apple his name. The name seemed silly now, but at 8 years of age, he had named the horse for their favorite food. He knew that hunting stags, lions, and foxes was not the same as killing men in battle. Perhaps Apple knew the difference too. Arthur had never killed a person. He had never seen combat beyond training and melees. He had rarely seen a man killed. Even death had been rare in his life. Men and women who worked at Starfall died, children often died of sicknesses, but he had seldom seen their bodies. The worst had been the man who had washed ashore at Starfall when Arthur was 8 or 9, he had been half-eaten by water and sea creatures. Today he would have to kill. He unstrapped his bow and held it in his trembling hands. Like hunting, he whispered through parched lips. The armies of House Lannister were terribly outnumbered and the battle cry would be alarming so early in the morning. They had to know that the battle was upon them this day. The horns were blown as the first streaks of red and gold appeared in the sky. He could see the Lannister armies. Some were at the ready, perhaps anticipating an early attack. Others were scrambling to arms and horses, those who had been sleeping in the night. Slaughter, he thought, swallowing hard. Jon would be here too, though where Arthur did not know. Would Jon kill today? Would Jon be safe? The armies slowly rallied. Each man and woman moved to their positions. From the farthest portion of the army which was then camped along the silvery waters of the Blackwater under the Baratheon banner to the nearest armies of Dawn and the Reach which were scattered amongst the hills, all were readied for the day. All were standing in their lines, waiting the orders to attack. He pulled an arrow from his quiver. Even the lions were assembling in their lines. Like hunting, he told himself, except that these were people who would die. The order was called to ready their arrows. The horns blew again. He raised the bow, knocked the arrow. The men on both sides advanced. What if I miss? What if I hit one of our men? Must I kill? He could hear the shouts of both sides rushing toward one another. Loose. He saw a target, down in the valley clothed in red and gold. He drew back the arrow, and let it soar. The arrow missed. He was shaking. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply. He looked again. The armies drew still nearer. Arrows came near to him from the enemy. Enemies who will kill you. He raised his bow, he trusted the bow. It was his own weapon. He knew the tension of the wood, of the string. He drew an arrow from the quiver. He knocked the arrow, pulled, and let the arrow fly. A man fell from his horse, blood pouring from his helm where the arrow had lodged under his neck. Arthur continued to loose his arrows. Each one hit and felled another man. It's like hunting, his mind repeated, except that people die. Underscore 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 underscore. Jon's heart was racing as they joined the battle. He remembered the melee at King's Landing and recalled a similarity to that day. He knew that today was deadly earnest, unlike that day. His job was to guard the king, to win, and to survive. He could glimpse the banners of dawn on the crest of the hill. Arthur, Edric, Beric, Oberyn, Nymeria, and Oberyn would be somewhere in that throng, he knew. He breathed a prayer to the gods for safety as they fought. He wanted to see his kin alive again. King Renly remained back, searching the field for the commanders. They would be on the search for him also. That was the way of war. Yet even further back in the sea of bodies, Jon, the king, and the men and women of the guard found blood upon their blades. The Lannister men pressed forward, only to be pushed back by the onslaught of arrows which streamed down upon them from the archers and the waves of horse and foot soldiers which pressed forward between the volleys. They drew back and pressed forward again, only to be pushed back yet again. Between the pushes, young squires would scatter across the fields to retrieve arrows, many of the boys would be slaughtered as they scrambled across the blood-soaked field. The third push forward by the Lannister men was made around midday, when the arrows were in short supply. They directed the brunt of their forces toward the king. To his left, Jon could see the forces under the flag of House Martell rush forward, encircling and culling a wide swath of Lannister men, though their own men and women were falling from their horses during the assault. Those who fled from the fray were met with bursts of arrows which the archers unleashed upon them. At last, the lines of Lannister forces were broken. Small folk began to flee, only to be felled by arrow, mace, and horse. The king seized upon the moment to charge forward, directing himself and his men toward the commanders, Lords Tywin and Kevan Lannister. The king was surrounded by his guards. Jon rode to Renly's right. The three kings' guard rode in front of the king. Their white cloaks made their position more obvious and vulnerable. A group of armored knights detached from the main force which surrounded Lord Tywin. They charged toward the king. Swords, shields, horses, and men all clashed with shouts and fury. Jon could scarcely see what was happening from one moment to the next. He lost count of the number of men who died upon his blade. Having seen death in increasing amounts over that past several days and hours, Jon had begun to feel rather numb toward all of it. It was easier to think of the men on the field as less than human, to not think of the fact that they must have homes and families to which they longed to return. This was the nature of duty and war, it held no joy or pleasure. His horse fell out from under him, cut down but a man whose head was swiftly removed by Lady Brienne. She was a terrifying warrior, Jon realized in that moment. She lacked finesse, but made up for it in strength and speed. Somehow they were all on the ground shortly after that. Steel clashed with steel. Shouts and screams echoed across the fields. Somewhere people were shouting names of the gods, loved ones, and overlords. Several of the Lannister noblemen were fallen but others still advanced. Jon still fought beside his king. Renly was easily cutting through his foes with quick slashes and lunges with his sword and mace. Jon ensured that no one could approach the king from the right, along with several other swordsmen and Brian. Then Jon saw the danger. A man with a spear. He was riding swiftly forward upon a white horse which was streaked red with blood. Jon knew his duty. He acted without thinking and pushed the king away. Then he felt a sudden shock of pain, sharp and dull at the same time. He saw the horse and rider fall to the ground, dead. Then the world went black. Asterisk 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 Rob. Riverrun held tranquility within its walls, perhaps due to the sound of rushing water which could be heard everywhere within the grounds of the castle. To Robb Stark, it was a welcomed respite after the long journey from Winterfell and the battle which he had led in the Whispering Wood. After a few days in the castle, he could understand why his mother loved her childhood home so much. When walking through the Godswood, he was struck by the serenity of the place. Though the Godswood at Riverrun was vastly different from the Godswood in Winterfell, he still felt the same deep solemnity within. He sunk his fingers into Grey Wind's thick fur and stroked his direwolf as they sat beside the riverbank. He hoped they could return home soon. He missed his brothers, sisters, and father. He wanted to return to the normalcy of life before King Robert had come north. Yet he knew life could not be the same, not after all that had come to pass. His thoughts drifted to Bran. The last time Robb had seen his little brother, he was in bed supported by cushions. To think that his brother would never walk again hurt more than words could express. Bran had always been so brave, so adventurous. He had climbed the walls of Winterfell since he was little. How could he make his little brother smile or laugh when he could